This is the D6 generation with your hosts, Craig Gallant.
No, cut that. Keep that. Someday it's going to be worth something.
Russ Wakelin.
You put me in an ATST with frickin' Wookiees attacking me and whatnot?
Now you're talking. And Matt and Rich in the third chair.
It's just a great game.
Really, Matt? Really?
With contributions from Total Fangirl
Vampires do not sparkle.
and our loyal listeners.
Are you crazy? That's like 400 hours of gamer nonsense.
Welcome to another edition of Rapid Fire, the roundtable discussion of all things gaming. Coming to the speed of a KLM Airbus A3303, yeah, something like that. And we came all the way over from New England. This edition is brought to you by our friends at Steamforged Games, who invited us to cross half the globe to share their big first convention with them. Tonight, our panelists are, as always, Russ, Witch Beatrice Wakelin, and very, very special guest, Rich Laurentius of the Great Swamp Loxham, and Matt Havel the Rock Hart, the beating hearts and guiding lights of Steamforged Games. Let's begin. Issue number 1. First released to the gaming world in 2011, Dark Souls is an action role-playing video game that has since been heralded as one of the best video games ever by multiple industry sources. Although some have complained the game can be brutal and unforgiving, it has built a massive global following that launched it into video game stardom and has fueled an enormous trilogy that shows no signs of slowing down. Question. Ignoring the greatness that awaits the board game of the same name, how many industry awards did the original Dark Souls receive, including Game of the Year, from 4 different outlets? Rickert of Vinheim, Russ.
I'm going to say 13.
Manus, Father of the Abyss, Matt.
11.
Rhea of Loremond, Rich.
8.
That means that you are all wrong! 14, where Russ is the closest, and close means nothing. Issue number 2. In any game that throws living, breathing, or clicking and whirring mascots into a whirling, violent atmosphere of a game that propagates the terrible, domineering tropes of all violent war proxy sports, one thing must be carefully considered: the concept of animal cruelty. Truly, can it ever be said that it is good, honest fun to punt a majestic raven into a goalpost, stomp a cute little otter to the grass, or set an adorable monkey on fire?
Smash it.
I leave it to you to decide. Question. What registered trademark stamp issued solely by the Association American Humane will Guildball never win? Rhesus Monkey Russ.
Prevention of animal cruelty.
Indian Miner Matt.
Most boring game.
River Wallaby Rich.
The animal cruelty protection
It
policy?
was so close. They were both so close. So
Well, I was close.
And yet that makes it completely... No, you were correct, but wrong in regard to the question. No animals were harmed in the making of this film is what they generally give, but I would say game, so you would have been wrong if you said film anyway. Has there been a Guildball movie? I don't know. However, if there was, I'll be put out that I didn't know about it. Issue number 3. In the 17th century, crossing the Atlantic was an ordeal that could take from 2 to 3 months. Improvements in ship design, sail plan, etc. often cut that time down to 6 to 8 weeks in the 18th and 19th century. With the advent of steam power in the early 19th century, the time was cut further down to 4 weeks, then 2 weeks, and then less. Question. In 1986, Sir Richard Branson crossed the Atlantic in the Virgin Atlantic Challenger 2, breaking the world record for fastest crossing by ship. How long did Sir Richard take? John Rogers Russ.
6 days.
Arthur Rostron Rich.
4 days.
Thomas McDonough Matt.
36 hours.
30. That will require me to do some math. No, I'm sorry, wrong. 3 days, 8 hours, and 31 minutes. That is one fast speedboat. I wouldn't want to have to try to use the head. Issue number 4. Cricket is a bat and ball game played between 2 teams of 11 players on a cricket field, at the center of which is a rectangular 22-yard long pitch with a wicket, a set of 3 wooden stumps, sited at each end. One team, designated the batting team, attempts to score as many runs as possible whilst their opponent's field. Each phase of play is called an innings. After either 10 batsmen have been dismissed or a fixed number of overs have been completed, the innings end and the 2 teams then swap roles. The winning team is the one that scores the most runs, including any extras gained during their 1 or 2 innings.
Wow. Very simple.
Question. Surely you didn't think I, an American barbarian, was going to ask 2 learned Englishmen a question about cricket. What are the official dimensions of a certified curling sheet? Ralph Stockley Ross.
16 by 48.
Mirjam Ott Matt.
54 by 12.
Ryan Fry Rich.
80 by 14.
That's closest, and yet so very wrong on so many different levels. 146 to 150 feet.
What?
Those Canadians aren't very precise. By 14 and a half to 16 and a half feet.
What?
Wherever it fits, really.
Width is important.
Yeah, that's it. Thank you. That's
sound
it
like
for
cricket.
now. Thanks for listening, and good night.
This episode of the D6 Generation is brought to you by Lone Wolf Development. Take your game to the next level.
And by Geek Nation Tours. Rise up and join the Geek Nation, touring the world at geeknationtours.com.
And by Audible. Try the service, get a free book, and support the show. All by visiting audibletrial.com/D6G.
Hello.
Hey, and welcome to episode 202. Why are you 200?
Russ, how long it's been.
202
How long it's been.
of the D6 Generation. I'm Russ
Are
Wakeland.
you sure about that?
I'm Craig Gallant.
I'm Matt Hart.
And I'm Rich Oxum.
Hey, it's a man from Steamforged Games.
Steamforged Games.
We're so excited. We are thrilled to be recording here live from SteamCon. Actually, it's sort of talk about Eddie's in the space-time continuum,
That's
Craig.
true.
The beginning of the show is starting at the end of the convention.
I am so confused.
It is very confusing, but today's episode is really going to be all about SteamCon. We get to talk to designers. We get to talk to Matt and Rich extensively here.
Extensively.
We got to play the new hotness from you guys, Dark Souls. We're really going to talk a lot about that.
Played a lot of Guildball. Played
And-
with listeners.
What's been going on with Steamforged Games, where you guys are up to, what the whole idea behind Kickoff is, the new starter set for Guildball. Lots and lots of hotness here.
Yeah,
really exciting.
It's been a crazy whirlwind of 3 days.
Been great.
It's been awesome. So thank you guys for bringing us out. We should say big thank you to Matt and Rich and everyone at Steamforged Games for being hosts to the D6 Generation,
Yeah.
flying us out here, putting us up in this great room with an amazing overlooking view of the cricket/rugby field.
It's cricket.
There's a rugby shop. It's very confusing.
That's because there's a rugby field on the other side of the stadium.
I see. Okay, fair enough. I can't. These English games.
No,
They're confusing me.
well, clearly.
All right.
And geography.
So before we get to all that stuff, we have to do a little bit of housekeeping. Craig.
Little bit quick.
It is the beginning of the show. We got to take care of these things. First and foremost, the contest for Stronghold Games is drawing to a close.
Yes, it is.
So please get those last tweets in, and we'll be doing a winner next episode for that.
Yep. And what were those tweets?
You had to tweet a favorite boast for Dragon and Flagon.
As if you were a fantasy character in a big, giant tavern brawl.
Yes, and make sure you put the hashtag D6G Pick Me.
Yeah.
We'll be looking at those and picking some favorites, and you'll be winning some great Stronghold games from anything in the catalog right now.
That's right.
Thank
Anything
you.
in the catalog, including Terraforming Mars.
Yes, so thank you so much for Stephen Bonacor for that awesome prize. Also,
Even Bonaclaw.
Bonaclaw is right, because it is the season. Also, we
Ho,
just
ho, ho.
we just met up at since we're here in England,
Yes,
Went
jolly
to a pub.
old England, I believe, is the technical term.
went to the pub right across the way here, and who should we run into but Matt and Rich?
Matt and Rich for the Lost Chapter.
And we chatted about the Lost Chapter. Gentlemen, do you remember what we discussed in the Lost Chapter?
We had a wonderful chat about the beer
We
and
did.
and how Steamforged Games uses numbers to make decisions.
Yes, it was really fascinating. It was really a great discussion.
Very interesting.
We just rolled dice. We rolled dice.
We-
mate.
That's all random.
Oh,
It's all random.
it's a screamer.
what should-
Build more teams. See what I did there? I've been learning all weekend. I know
He's
the
got all-
building
he's got
here.
all
I've been
kinds
working
of-
on
yeah.
Be impressed.
It's trying. All right. So, but if you want to listen to the Lost Chapters,
Yes.
hear us scream and other things.
Yes. Russ, what's the best way to get to them?
Well played, sir.
Thank you.
Go to the D6generation.com
Mm-hmm.
and click on the little Patreon logo to the
Mhm.
side, and that will take you to our Patreon page,
Mhm.
and you can become a patron. Give us a
Which
little
would
tip
be
in the
great.
tip jar.
Yep.
A couple bucks an episode will get you unlimited access to the Lost Chapter.
Every Lost Chapter
Over
we've ever done.
130 of these, about half-hour episodes.
Insane.
It's like Netflix.
Continuing the excellent business model of giving you 4 hours every 2 weeks for free.
And then charging you for half an hour.
for half an hour.
Exactly. It's brilliant. It's the best half hour, though.
It says
We've been told.
always.
Right.
Always.
That's what we've been told.
Yep.
So thank you to all our patrons for making that possible.
Yep.
So, Craig, what's it time now for?
Well, today it's time for Achievement gaming. I have no soundboard.
So funny,
Burnt the sound.
funny story about this.
Story.
So here we are in lovely England, and the power supply here is quite different.
We
than this
lugged the entire studio.
We got-
the
we have
D6G studio.
We have an
across
entire
the
suitcase
ocean.
dedicated to this, and so it's our very first session, and so I'm so excited. I'm going to sit down with Matt and Rich, and we're all excited. Saturday morning, they come in a little early, no problem, plugging everything in. and we forgot our power adapter.
I was at the Steamforged store.
You were late. So I forgot our step-down power adapter, but fortunately I had a straight adapter that just turned it. So I figured I'll just plug the soundboard right in.
He MacGyvered the whole thing,
What
really,
could
which was
possibly
great
go wrong?
until this moment.
And instantly there was a little and then smoke.
Yep.
A lovely odor.
This was so much more dramatically told to me when I walked in moments after.
And then we had no soundboard. So
Right.
fortunately, we've cobbled together a functional studio now, but we don't have a great sound effect.
No
anymore.
echoes. Echo.
Right. So that is dead. But
empty.
But anyway, so now let's talk about our
like a
achievements.
sheep.
Games you've been playing.
That was bad. It was
So,
bad.
gentlemen, what have you been playing lately here? What have you been? What did you get any games in over the weekend?
Well, they got at least one in.
Right.
That is true. We played each other
We
Right.
did.
for about 20 minutes before we got called away to do something.
Yeah.
Now, do you still guys get passionate about playing Guildball? I mean,
Oh,
you've been designing it for so
absolutely.
long.
Yeah, I mean, we love it. Like we play this game like weekly. We've probably played hundreds and hundreds of games now, but I think it's just one of those games that you just want to play. You know, I mean, we've loved coming down to SteamCon, actually getting games against people from all around the world that have flown here, and that it's just a real honor to play these guys. Really fun.
It's one of those things that, you know, we get to play with the models in test and while you're developing them, and you don't actually realize, but you look at them from a really different perspective. So I've been kind of giddy with excitement about coming here because I knew I was going to finally get the actual cards of the models, and it felt
Right.
like Christmas, and now I can play all these teams. And so I packed pretty much every team that I have, which is most of them. And I
Go
couldn't,
figure.
I couldn't decide which team I wanted to play. So every game that I played over the weekend, I played with a different team, and had an absolute blast. But I think I managed to complete just 2 games out of all the ones I started.
Wow.
Before I got called.
I got 3 finished, but I am 1 for 2. Like I'm not doing great this season.
You got 3 finished, but
3
one
finished.
for 2.
I only won 1.
I thought I heard
one.
last night you say something like, "I won my first season 3 game."
I did.
No, that was this
literally, yeah.
morning.
Does
See,
it?
it's talk
Right.
about
It's
time warp.
time
Yeah,
is-
time
But
warp.
do you guys literally feel like coming here was your first time to really play season 3?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
That's
this,
really
this is
interesting.
the launch. Like, it's,
Yep.
you know, this feels like the first time we're actually playing it, even though we've played test games and that. So it's live with everyone looking at it. It's not real until that point.
Great.
Right?
That's
I haven't
awesome.
won any games.
Everyone-
Every game I looked like was the one that got cancelled.
And don't forget, you were both involved in the Dark Souls
And
streamed.
the Dark
Yes.
Souls
The
stream was
first
lost
public
amazing.
playing.
Yeah,
Lost
that
that
was
as
awesome
well.
fun.
You know?
Lost that
yeah,
as well.
like
Now, did you guys?
Now, Matt, was that your fault?
No,
That's
not so much.
Speaking as the assassin who
That's not
died
what-
in our game.
That's not what Alex says. And he's an impartial observer, so I don't know.
He was just sitting at the table.
Right? Just watch
Yeah.
it. So now that was interesting to me too because it felt to me like it looked like you guys were really enjoying yourselves, but it didn't seem scripted at all. Like you guys were just learning the game. I mean, you obviously play tested it before,
Yep.
but it sounded like to me like it was the first chance to really sit down with a game close to production quality for you.
Yes.
What did it kind of feel like? Did it feel like, oh my god, we're playing this for the
Oh,
first
it's
time?
wonderful. So, you know, when we first started, you know, working on the project straight after the Kickstarter finished, we took the design team away, locked ourselves in a cottage in the Lake District. We took a bunch of food. I brought my dog, and we just basically hung out for a week. And we did. We were up at 7 a.m, generally working through till 7, 8, 9 o'clock in the evening. Then we'd sit down, have some food together, and play some more games. But what we did in that week was really define the shape of what the project should look like. And we came away with it with a massively positive experience that we were convinced that we had accelerated the development by 3, 4, 5, 6 months, you know,
Wow.
big wild numbers coming out. But that kind of concentrated time together really formed a strong bond in the team, but also it gave us a really strong identity for the core game itself. And that then went into the development team, and DC and Alex took the lead responsibility on finalizing the development of the game now that we had established what the core game experience was going to be. And we've obviously stayed in touch with the process along the way, but that was the very first time that we've actually played with full color tokens, with the models, with the board laid out.
So it was all coming together. You
Yeah.
could sort of feel like it was really going to look
Yeah,
like.
and it was probably slightly indulgent to have not done that up until that point, but it was wonderful to be able to do it live and on camera.
Yeah.
We were actually relearning the game that we had designed back in the cottage, and the game felt so wonderfully within the constraints of the game that we had defined and the vision that we had for the game, and yet so very polished and developed from that point.
There was no scripting or anything. We literally just cracked the set open like you do when you get the product yourselves, and just ran with it. So it was it was great to just see four guys sitting down and playing a game of Dark Souls.
Yeah, that's awesome.
It was fun to watch.
I do have to say that the cottage experience sounds much more elegant and refined when Matt talks about it.
Yes.
Because it's a cottage experience. The image in my head is very distinct. It's a cottage. And then when we had Alex and DC towards later on in the show, of course, with the American talking about it, it was all about the cabin, going out to the cabin. Totally different image in my head.
Yeah.
So it's an interesting little thing that happened in my head.
Nice.
I took my dog, who was a real character, and really helped kind of bond the team together. And
what kind of dog is it?
He's a big fat Labrador.
Oh, excellent!
He loves everyone and wants to eat pretty much anything edible.
Shoes mainly, like real shoes.
Things. But there was one time we were in the lounge, and we pushed all the couches to the side and got the rugs out of the way, and we had these big full scat pads laid out, and we were starting to sketch out, the actual game engine and how things flow through the engine and what this idea meant, and we started building this big brain diagram out. And Jake, my dog, came wandering in, decided that the thing that we were all crouched around was clearly the spot
most
where he
exciting
was going to lie down. So he literally just came down, laid down, rolled on his back.
Look at me instead.
Yeah, I am here.
Nice.
It was a really good week.
Very cool.
Awesome.
While you guys are here, I do want to ask you one quick question, though. What is your favorite, each of you, non-Steamforged game?
I think mine right now is the Game of Thrones card game. I think for Fantasy Flight, I think it's fantastic. I really like it. I look what they've done with it in the new version, and I'm playing it at the moment weekly on a Thursday night. So yeah, it's a great game, that one.
Yeah, you guys do play a lot of other people's games. Right?
Oh, absolutely. I think it's part of your duty as a designer to see what's out there and play other people's games. Like, I think it's really closed off if you just look at what you do. So you've got to immerse yourself.
Now, Rich, do you have a type of game that attracts you more? Do you have a certain style of game you like?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's all about the mechanics and the combinations. Mm-hmm. So any game that's kind of comboing off where I can build decks and lists, things like that, I really enjoy those kind of style things.
The Game of Thrones game is fantastic.
It's perfect.
I love the art, too.
Yeah, it's awesome.
How about you, Matt?
So I'm playing Game of Thrones as well. Board game wise, I really enjoy playing Blood Rage every time I get it out.
That's a great game.
That's a great game.
Have you got the Broken Token insert for it?
Oh no, I got the Feldherr one, which is a German company. Same thing.
Yeah, those are awesome. Yeah,
very needed when all of our friends at Cool Mini send us over the
when you get all the expansions and everything.
Yeah, all the expansions and everything. Role playing game wise, I just started running a 5e campaign. And
nice.
Yeah, and
we're doing a lot too.
I'm loving 5e.
Isn't it great?
Oh,
I love 5e. Yeah,
really good.
Yep.
So I'm really enjoying that.
Great.
Awesome.
Great. Well, Craig, why don't you run down your stuff? What have you been doing?
I played Dark Souls with you, and it was great. We talked extensively about it in the show, so I won't talk about it here a lot. Although I will say I loved it. It was very polished. Had a cottage feel to me, really. Nothing about cabin about it.
Felt like it was built in the wilderness.
And I played 3 games of Guildball. I could have gotten a 4th in, but I spent one kind of helping Russ and a listener who had not played. His name was Stuart.
Stuart, yes, well done.
And thank you, right off the top of my head, no notes necessary.
Like a professional.
So then time wise that didn't work out. So then I played Russ, that didn't go well. Then I played Andrew, another listener. That went great. Then I played Russ again today. That didn't go well. It's all about the clock, though, and I discovered this at home my last time I played, and I really felt that Guildball really shines when you play it with that chess clock. And Russ and I played that last game with the chess clock. It was great.
Yeah, I had a confession to make. So I hadn't played when Guildball first launched. I got all excited about it, and I played a few games with Craig, and then I got distracted by some other shiny. And coming back here, and Craig has never left it. He's been with it. I just got distracted. I wanted to come back to it, didn't. And then when 2 things happened, we got invited out, but then also I knew that the new kickoff set would be launching, so I really wanted to pick that up. So the first thing I did Friday, in fact, I ran out in the middle of the
the beginning.
I was like, I gotta go get it before it didn't sell out, but I was worried. So I ran and got it, and immediately I was in love, and I was playing it. And a couple things, I got 4 games in over the weekend, all with the starter set, and switching back and forth between the Masons and the Brewers.
Yeah, you did 50-50, right?
What's that? Oh, both. Yes, I played 2 of each times. And what was fun about it was the very first game I played with a tutorial book. So, and that book takes you through it. And literally, I hadn't really read the rules or anything. I hadn't been refreshed in any way. And so our Stuart, our listener, also had never played Guildball. He'd come up here because he lives nearby. He knew we were going to be here. He's like, I just want to see you guys in person. And I've been interested in Guildball, never tried it. So we sat down, we opened it up, we played, just as Matt was saying later in the show, he talks about the Christmas morning effect. Can you just open the box and play the game? We literally opened the box. We set everything up as described in the book. One critique, the pictures are very small, so take a phone and zoom it in for your deployment. But then we went through and just read each other it was almost like make your own adventure. Like you read a paragraph to each other, walked us through, and by the end of the thing, we were ready to start playing, and we just did. It worked brilliantly.
Excellent.
He loved it so much, he ran out and bought his own set.
Despite the fact that Russ gave him the team that actually starts 4 points down in the tutorial.
And I did manage to win.
Well done, Russ.
Well, I let him pick his side. He liked Brewers.
Well, yes, and poor Stuart now knows the Jedi mind trick is a real thing.
It is. But the tutorial worked great, got us right into the game, and it immediately gets you passionately excited about learning more. So we had a great time with that, and then I played.
And as you said, it really kind of points out what the role of the different models are.
Yes.
So as opposed to, even if you've got somebody good that's teaching you, they're probably not going to say, okay, that's this guy, he's good at this. The tutorial where this is my guy that's going to be the scorer usually. Yep. And so Russ goes in and he got very frustratingly good, very frustratingly quickly.
Clint is the man.
Flint is the man.
And that's what the tutorial says. The tutorial basically says, pass the ball to Flint, is basically what it says.
Right, yeah.
That's life advice.
It's good life advice. So that was fantastic. Then I met a new gentleman who had not heard of our show before, which is a great boy, and he was...
Voy's going to listen to this.
Hopefully Voy listens. And Voy was interesting because there was a quite sensible rule that I really like, which is in the open play area here at SteamCon, you have to have painted models, unless you're playing with the new kickoff box. So we were able to bring that out, and he said, I don't have painted models. Can I play? And he said, can I play with you? I said, sure. So we sat down, and he learned also. He had played a bit online, knew enough to be dangerous, and we played again, had a great time. And I managed to eke out a win there, but that one we played from the ground up. And then I played Craig today. My last game was with you. Did I play you twice? I guess I played you twice.
Yesterday once,
and when we played today, we used the chess clock.
Right.
And that's, I think, the chess clock takes the game to the next level, which is really the sweet spot. We started. That was the highest scoring game. I scored 3 goals and you scored 2.
Oh wow!
Yeah.
Because we kept making not blatant mistakes, but you're just kind of moving so fast that allocating that influence.
Well, you're committing too.
You're committing quickly.
Kind of go and commit, and
I really liked it because the game feels more sporty with the clock. Because most sports have timers, but also B, it doesn't let you think too long because I think when it gets too thinky, it's kind of broke. Anyway, had a great time with that as well. So, what about modeling? You guys done any modeling?
Did you get any speed painting in the last 3 days?
Not in the last 3 days, but I did decide just before coming up to SteamCon that I wanted to play some Union, and I didn't actually have any Union models painted uniformly, so I quickly stuck some together during a meeting that Rich and I were having, and then as soon as that finished, I whipped the airbrush out and blasted through a whole team in an hour and a half.
Wow. So, Russ, there's your challenge right there.
There it is. I'm going to try it.
Hour and a half.
Well, I can't wait to paint up the plastics. I'm looking really forward to doing that. So
I managed to sit down at SteamCon, and I picked the kickoff setup, and I painted one of the bricks. So I spent an hour just with a paintbrush. I don't usually get time to, so it was nice to sit there and just really paint one up. And they come out really nice. Like
I think they look fantastic.
Really happy.
I think people are going to be
several painted up, and they looked great.
People are going to be surprised when they see these plastics in person. They look solid.
From the modeling perspective, I'm just going to jump in here, which is kind of weird. Because I don't think we, over the course of all the recording that we've done, we talked about it here and there, but we didn't really, I think, tie it all together. An amazing thing happened this weekend that I don't think has ever been done before. I know I've never heard of it. That would be, there was a seminar for designing a new guild.
Which Russ was late to.
So that he could,
thank you.
And it was noted. His absence was noted. Where, as a group, we all broke down into work groups and we designed, using air quotes around design, but it was a high level
brainstorming session. Yeah,
thing.
Sure.
And from that came a couple different models, and one model was chosen. And Russ, your sculptor, was given the concept of that model.
Yep.
And that night he sculpted that model from scratch.
Mm-hmm.
That model was then sent to your 3D printer.
Yep.
It was several copies were 3D printed? Or
A number of copies just for fail safe.
just in case.
Yeah.
And then was any of them painted? One or two of them?
So they cured overnight.
Yep.
And H, our 3D printer manager, he drove them down. And Trent Dennison, who won Master Artisan,
I think he won like 8 painting.
lots of painting
Yeah,
awards. He's very good. He grabbed the model and painted it.
Yep.
Overnight, Saturday night.
So talk about hobby achievement in gaming. This was the concept didn't even exist 3 days ago. In one seminar, we came up with this idea. In another seminar, you guys came up with the rules.
So while it was all being printed, we were in another room designing the rules with a bunch of guys, and actually came up with a pretty coherent
pretty good.
model design that we're going to put into playtest.
And these were all seminars where people from the convention could go in and watch.
Right.
And it was sculpted in a seminar as well.
Yes.
I think.
Russ
So
did
it's
it.
really, really insane.
What's fantastic about that is everybody participates, and now you guys announced also you'll be giving it away as the free goodie bag.
Exclusive. Yeah.
We're gonna do that every
SteamCon
year
next
now.
year.
Yeah,
That's
so
fantastic. So what a great way to learn the process and be a part of the process.
Yeah, it was
absolutely.
really,
Awesome.
really unbelievable.
Great idea. Craig, what about you? Did you get any modeling over the weekend?
No, I did not.
I opened up little plastic guys and put them on the table.
You did
and played.
indeed,
They were
yeah.
awesome.
Which is all you
There you
need when you're talking about the
There you go.
kickoff box.
Well, you know what? Okay, so this is something that was cool. So while I was playing the game, normally, and we've all done this as miniature gamers, right? You want to play the game, you buy the models, you kind of glue them together. They're all metal on the table, and you feel bad about it, and you feel kind of wrong, like you're cheating. But with the two colored teams like that, I didn't feel wrong. I felt like I was playing a board game.
Yeah.
It felt great. I didn't feel guilty. Now, I'm excited to paint them because they look so awesome. But it's that desire, like you want to paint those crossover hybrid games, not like I'm a miniature gamer and I'm cheating. So it's a mental place, but it was pretty cool.
I thought it was phenomenal.
All right, so we do need to, while we have these two esteemed gentlemen here, Craig,
Yes.
we have to ask them about their other geeky passions.
Okay.
So what have you guys been watching for, like, TV shows, nerdy books, movies? What gets you guys excited?
Oh, wow.
Oh, Suits is one I've been kind of polishing off for TV.
Is that nerdy?
Yeah, it's pretty dirty. Like high-end
In
dirty.
what way?
I think it's pretty. Okay,
Like, the
maybe
girls
not.
are like super hot, and the guys wear like $1,000 suits. That's not
I mean,
really
Nerdy,
really-
not dirty.
Okay, all right.
Nerdy.
It's called Suits. Didn't see a lot of those over the weekend.
No, that seems like the opposite of
$1 million
nerdy.
lawyers walking around.
Right.
I'm trying to think of other TV ones I've watched that are more.
How about movies or books? What do you like to read?
Is Westworld over here?
Yes.
No,
yes.
Have you
that
watched
is
that?
come over. That's
Yeah,
on my
that's
radar.
quite-
Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm
you
in
should definitely
Westworld,
check
yeah.
that out.
Although it's kind of annoying. I have to watch it while my missus isn't around because she sits there going, I just don't understand what's going on. I'm like, I don't want to explain it while it's going on. But Westworld's excellent, very visceral.
Yeah, yes.
Yes.
I mean, it's very like Game of Thrones. It's got that sort of over the top.
Yeah, you can definitely see they're trying to tap into that demographic. Oh, speaking of which, I'm rereading Game of Thrones from the beginning.
Okay. Yeah, there you go.
Now, why? Have you heard? Is there any? Is the next book coming out soon? You're prepping.
We haven't
Or you
heard
just-
anything.
Yeah,
no, I haven't heard
okay.
anything. It's more a lamentation that I finally caught up with the end of the last season. So
Yeah.
I have a rule, which is when the new season of Game of Thrones comes out, I don't watch it until I've watched every episode leading up until that.
Wow, that's going to be quite a feat coming up when you've got
Correct.
5 seasons to
Yeah.
watch.
So
Wow.
Fortunately, we had a trip to China to go and have a look through a few factories, and a 12-hour
few
flight
off.
cuts through
That
a
does.
couple
Quite a
of
bit.
seasons
There you
very
go.
easily. So that was pretty good. Other than that, I'm reading a whole bunch of R.A. Salvatore books.
Oh,
Yeah, okay.
Always
Back to
good.
the
Classics.
Dritz Word and
Yep.
stuff. And I've been steered onto the Jim Butcher fantasy series.
Oh, the Dresden Files
No,
or
no,
the
Dresden,
the Codex Alera?
That's the one.
Yep,
Apparently
yep.
they're excellent. So they're queued up on my Kindle next.
Nice.
No,
All right, great.
nice. Excellent.
Great. What about you, Craig? What have you been reading?
Timeless. Have you guys
No.
watched Timeless at all? I've it's a really cool game
TV show.
TV show. Think like Bill Gates designs a time traveling machine and then a terrorist takes
Does he
it.
play himself?
But
It's actually, the guy kind of like cross between Elon Musk and Bill Gates. Is a super billionaire guy, built a time machine on his own.
right.
The government kind of finds out
or
about it.
was it on?
Or was it on his own?
And it's one of those shows where it's just getting more and more convoluted
Right.
and plotty.
okay.
So super evil terrorist bad guy steals the time machine.
Or is
Fortunately-
he super evil terrorist?
Or is he
bad
the
guy?
good? Yeah. But there's a second time machine that's all...
Because everybody, I mean, you're not going to build just one.
There's
You're
the
going to
first-
have a second.
There's the
one.
version
Makes sense.
1 beat up, run down time machine that kind of works.
Right.
So they get a elite team of folks to go chasing them in history.
Wow.
And it's kind of neat, but what's interesting about him is they put him back in these moments in history where the bad guy goes to like the assassination of Abraham Lincoln.
Right.
Whatever they change happens. So, but they don't want to change anything. They don't know what it'll do. So they're there and they have to morally not let Lincoln get saved. And we don't know what the bad guy's trying to do. Like they're at the Hindenburg disaster. Is he trying to stop the Hindenburg from crashing? There's all this interesting.
The bad guy's actually trying to do good things.
We don't know. I mean, you don't really know.
No.
Yeah.
So
the
he's doing
Hindenburg
these.
thing is great because he's trying to stop the Hindenburg going in one direction, and you don't know why.
So instead of blowing up, well, I don't want to spoil anything.
No, yeah, and there's a lot of poignant moments. Too.
But it's good.
There's the pilot is African American, and they go back with Lincoln, and he has to like let them kill Lincoln.
Right.
And so there's a lot of
pretty interesting.
So I'm loving
it's a nice
that.
blend of classic sci-fi where it's got morals in with the science.
Talking of time travel, have you seen Predestination, the movie?
No, is it good?
It's one of those movies you watch all the way to the end, and then you kind of go, huh. But it was pretty good all the way through, and then at the end you're like, I don't get it.
In a good way or not? I don't get it.
I just don't get it. Yeah, no, I don't want to spoil it for anyone, but yeah, it's.
I watched Inception again recently. Like
there's a good one.
Always.
That really has that feeling at the end of the spinning top.
Yeah.
So I did finish reading Fortune's Whelp that I started way back when we were talking about Blood and Plunder. And I listened to the Unreconstructed M and Other Stories by Philip K. Dick, which is narrated by listener Ray Greenlee, who sent me the audiobook. And that was good. There are 3 or 4 short stories in that collection that I think would make awesome movies, and then 4 or 5 that I was like, huh? But that was good. And then I downloaded Legends of the Dark Millennium Space Wolf.
Yeah, what'd you think?
By various authors, and Curse of the Wolfen by David Annandale, because I heard a rumor that something major might be happening in the 40K universe, and I haven't read any of those books in like 3 years. I know nothing about it, and I've always loved the Space Wolves. And I have to say, like, Black Library, seriously, when you've got Kindle and Amazon out there, you can't put so many barriers between a person buying a digital copy and their Kindle.
Yeah.
It was insane. It took me 3 days I'm sure Russ could have figured it out in a minute, but it took me 3 days to get it onto my phone. But it's fun. It's interesting because the Space Wolf book is multiple short stories all written by different guys, and it's interesting for me to see the Black Library having the exact same problems that I ran into with Wild West Exodus, where I did a novel, another writer did a novel, and then I did a novel, but it was all supposed to be a trilogy, and you've got these same interesting situations where a character is using words he wouldn't have used in the first book. So it's interesting. I feel better that Black Library did the same thing.
All right.
But yeah, so that's me. How about you, Russ?
Not a long list. I've been really enjoying Westworld. It gets even stronger as you watch.
Right.
So it's one of those shows that there's about the 3rd or 4th episode. You're like, oh my God, what just happened here? So definitely, if you have not watched it yet, definitely check that one out. Have you guys seen the new Harry Potter yet?
No, the
Fantastic.
The play was a good read though.
Was it? So the book's not doing well with my kids and their friends because they don't like to read and
it's not Harry Potter.
It's a script, isn't
it?
Format.
They don't like the script.
They don't like the script for the Harry Potter book. But the new movie they liked. It's like a visual feast. The story's a little.
Looks a bit CGI-y.
It's very CGI and the pacing's a little rough. Right. But I do like sort of like the 1920s America magical world thing. That's pretty cool. It's like a different world for them, which is kind of fun.
That kind of thing, I can't see past the cynicism of making a decision of putting it over in America, and you think, come on, you're just doing that for the for the mass market. Yeah,
it could be. Yeah,
as opposed to making a movie at all.
Well, just make it
after the Harry Potter story is dead and done. And
it's a movie.
Never going to go to this again because this is a good story that's finished unless I can make millions in which.
Well, now they've hobbited it. So now this book it's based on is a single book. There's no story in the book. The book's just like a monster manual.
Right.
And they've taken this single book and they've made it into a movie.
Yeah.
And it's supposed to be a 4-movie arc.
Oh my God.
Yeah, it's like The Hobbit. It's like they did The Lord of the Rings. That was great. And then they took The Hobbit and said, this single book that's short, we can make into 3 movies. So now they're going to make 4 or 5 out of this thing. I don't know how they're going to do it.
There's your cynicism. Right
yes.
there.
But it's like the play. I mean, I looked to get some tickets for the family for Christmas, but they sold out for the next year.
Yeah.
So, you were looking at paying ticket touts $300 or $400.
Oh, it was ridiculous. Yeah.
No
then
play
you find out that they've actually done the play in 2 parts. So if you want to see the full play, you have to go to the matinee, and then the evening So it's
Oh.
£600 a person.
I
Whoa.
didn't know. I didn't know.
I didn't know
when
that.
you're reading it, it is broken down into two. I didn't know how they were
It's
going to
two
do that.
separate-
Oh my!
yeah,
You've got to go to two
show-
separate.
And you got to get
days.
tickets for the same day, or you're going to be seeing it over.
Or you go
or you
on
gotta-
separate
oh,
occasions.
that's
which,
crazy.
I don't know,
That is
it
totally- you're
pisses
right.
me off, so, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, that's innovative.
That's
Yeah,
not playing
good
to the
job,
fans.
guys.
I think there's some issues there. Yeah, all right. And that's pretty much my list. I don't have a lot more. So that's what we've been playing lately. And we just want to say thank you to you guys for having us out. I know
Well,
we
you are
a
very
little
welcome.
later in the show, but I just have to reiterate. We got a chance to because we just watched here was the trophy ceremony.
Yeah.
Right, we got to
Yeah.
see the finals. The passion of watching the
Of
community,
the community.
watch
was
the
great.
finals. They're cheering like it's their best friend if they're playing. In some cases, it is.
Yeah.
Really into it, and then just watching the community interact with you guys, giving out the awards. It's very close knit, very tight, very.
Yeah.
They really appreciate and respect what you guys do, and I
Yeah.
think that says a lot about you guys and your company.
And the technical setup that you had was phenomenal. The amount of streaming that you did was great,
Yeah.
and the fact that you had the World Championship that was also streaming live, that was also being broadcast up in the big lounge area, so that there were probably about 50 of us all just watching
was
up
that
there.
many?
It was
Wow.
great.
Okay.
Yeah, it was awesome.
And I mean, that's like really, that's big time. You guys you're big time. Welcome.
Big time.
Yeah,
Well, we wear big trousers.
that's
You do.
true. That's true.
Excellent. Well, gentlemen, thank you so much for having us out.
Yep. And we'll be right back.
We'll be right
Talk
back.
about Steamforged Games.
Yes.
And you'll be right back. For us, it's all over. Unless we go have a couple drinks. All right.
There's enough pubs.
It's more fun. And now, in an attempt to bring a small amount of dignity and decorum to this otherwise base form of entertainment, and I use the term loosely, I am proud to present... Oh, get on with it. It's time for App of the Ep. Seriously, Wakeland, I used to have my own segment. Now I'm relegating to announcing this pap. Hey, you're lucky we still use you. Hey, and welcome back to another App of the Ep. This time around, it's Colt Express. The Hotness is now available on iOS. So we've talked about Colt Express on the show before. Great little board game with amazing components. And the premise of Colt Express is, of course, you are playing various cowfolk, cowboys, cowgirls, and various other people, attempting to rob a train in the Old West. And what's really, really cool about the board game is all the fantastic components. You have a little three-dimensional train, cool little cowboy meeples, and a really cool interaction system with cards, a kind of a programming system a la Robo Rally and games like that. And a really great little game. And now it's available for everyone on iOS for about $6. And I downloaded this with high anticipation because I love... the idea of having portable board games, my favorite board games, available for me on my phone. So when I'm, waiting in line or at a movie theater or, waiting for the movie to start, or maybe I'm on traveling, I can play these games. And I so quickly, as soon as I saw that, I immediately grabbed it and I got Colt Express. And I have to say I was instantly impressed with the quality. They did not shortchange this game. They could have made it still look like little meeples on the train, but no, they've actually got nice, great artwork. The theme and art and all the great cards on the box cover of the game is instantly recognizable in the app. And they did actually add little animations for when the different characters are punching each other or changing levels on the train, climbing onto the roof, getting shot, or picking up loot. All that stuff's in there. It's extremely intuitive, great interpretation of the game. Really a lot of fun. And what I really like is there's a single-player campaign, and each character has their own little mini comic book that sort of fills out their backstory and is really pretty cool. And each character's first page of their comic book is available unlocked when you start the game. And then as you complete these little single-player quests, which are really sort of like little mini puzzles. So as I mentioned in the board game, there's these little program moves you can do. And generally what you're trying to do is outsmart your opponent and end up in the right spot to end up with the most loot by the end of the train ride. With the single-player version, what's really interesting is they give you little puzzles to solve, like end up in the bar carriage with just you and one other player by a certain turn time. So it's really kind of a cool mechanic, and it's really neat, and it makes it into a puzzle game and a really nice solo play mechanic. It also has a great online play feature, so you can log in, create an account, and then play with other friends, other opponents of yours, online, which is fantastic. So the game is really great. I would highly recommend it with one caveat, and I'm very disappointed by this. It does not have pass and play, which is my absolute favorite feature for a board game. I mean, one of the great things about board games is the social aspect, and I love being able to be on an airplane, you got a long airplane ride with your family, firing up a game on your phone or your iPad and just passing it back and forth gives you that social interaction. You're chatting with each other. You're seeing your opponent make a great move and you can tease them about it or whatever. That goes away. You don't really have it in the online mode. And worse, if you're on an airplane, you don't have access to internet, it doesn't really work for you because you can't, play that way. Even with all your friends have their phones with them, it doesn't really work. So I really like pass and play in these games. I think it's really essential. And honestly, if I had known it did not have pass and play, I probably wouldn't have bought it, even though it is a fantastic limitation and the single-player mode's pretty cool. All that said, there's a lot of great single-player games that aren't based on board games for my phone. And if I want a board game on my phone, I really want pass and play. So I really, really hope that Asmodee and the folks involved in developing this game really come out and add on the pass and play addition to it, because I think that would turn it from an okay, cute little cowboy app into a fantastic full interpretation of the board game. But still, if you are looking for a good solo experience and really like Colt Express and want to practice like crazy, or you're in a situation where playing online with friends is a good option for you, then definitely check out Colt Express on iOS. Thank you for listening to another scintillating edition of App of the App, a segment in which, hey, less of that, more just getting on with the show. Seriously, Wakeland, you are like school in summer. No class.
We're here again with Rich and Matt from Steamforged Games. How you guys doing?
Good. Tired this morning, but good.
Yeah, we are. This is the first big full day of SteamCon was yesterday.
Yep.
First of all, we should say it's incredible. We're here at a sports complex, so pretty much all of the gaming rooms are open out onto this massive. Now, what is that?
Yes, I thought it was.
What is that field? We thought rugby, then we were corrected.
No,
Somebody told us cricket.
That's cricket.
So it's an enormous. It's probably about 3 to 4 times the size of a football field.
Right.
I had no idea that cricket took up so much space.
And that's actually quite a small cricket ground.
One?
Yeah, that's got a short boundary, Headingley.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. One of the less interesting things about Headingley is the hill that it's on.
Okay.
So when you're batting a certain way, it's easier to score boundaries in one direction than another. So.
Oh. Wow. Okay, and that would be why they focused on football for Guildball.
Absolutely.
Cricket seems a lot more complex. So we thought we'd touch base with Steamforged Games and where you guys are, where you are now, and all the different things that you're launching. And first of all, since the last time we talked, how are things going? First of all, how's the con going? You guys satisfied with everything that's shaping up?
Yeah, it's really good. I mean, it's been a long way in the works. We started like last year on this, starting to work towards locking the venue down, and we were batted back and forth on where should we go. We finally locked this place in, and really the last 4 weeks the staff have done fantastic for us. Me and Matt won't take credit for half of this. They've really put on a great show, and I think the first day's just been amazing to meet the amount of people that come in, the community style. It's really, really strong. Like, I think we've got a great community built up around our company, so it's just awesome for me and Matt to come here and just play games with people and chat and tell people about where we're going. So
excellent.
I wanted to follow up because it is amazing. The community is fantastic. The gaming area is really well done. Plenty of room, and it's just so cool to be gaming in front of the big sports. You can literally see out the windows and see the field. So it's just very inspirational when you're playing a game like Guildball in that kind of venue. What was sort of the inspiration for you guys? What were sort of the essential elements of your first convention? What were you thinking, we got to do this? What parts did you want to make sure you had?
That's a really big question.
Yeah, I mean, like for us, it was like we wanted to make sure that we had somewhere that had a lot of facilities on site. So we didn't want to be traveling between different venues. So we wanted to make sure that when someone was in for the day, they could go to the seminar rooms and they can go to the free play areas, and everything was there, and there's local food access and stuff like that. So that was the first protocol, sign the venue down. I think we wanted to make sure as well that we offered kind of the variety that the Steamforged Games brings. So we wanted to make sure there was some hobby aspects to the place. So we've got the hobby area where we can do speed paints, things like that. We wanted to make sure there was tournament support for the guys who really like the high-end tournaments. We had the World Championships here. But we also really wanted to make a real push on the free play area. We were launched in Season 2, the Big League kit, and the whole kind of idea of that and this empire of the free cities and the whole the civil war that's going on between Brisket and Philly. I think it's all kind of coming together at this kind of show, and that's probably been actually Steam for Friday the most popular part as well.
Yeah,
so.
And I mean, as Rick, just to follow on what Rich is saying, bringing it all together, what we really want to try and create with SteamCon is this single focal point. This is the most important date in the calendar for Steamforged Games. So, we have had to shuffle a few things about in terms of the seasons for Guildball and maybe accelerate Season 2 into Season 3 a little bit earlier than we had originally planned. But now that we're kind of building into this November-ish date each year, this is the bit where we can start, announcing all the new products we're going to be working on, all the changes that we're going to bring, all the new models for all the existing games, and it's really the first time for people to actually see stuff. So that's the buzz that we want to try and create.
Very cool. Very cool.
And it's I would say the free play area is fantastic. There's just the fact that you already have the neoprene mats and you just have those. They're not. So when you walk into that room, it's called the long room, which is fitting. It's a very long room with multiple tables per section, and then you've got beautiful terrain on each table, and the terrain is sort of. It's formalized so that you've got the same kind, even though it all looks custom made for each table. You can tell where the slick terrain is, where the trees are, where the different stone outcrops, and it looks beautiful. The whole place. There's a prize table at one end where you get points for playing. You get 1 point for winning and
3 for losing.
3 for losing. So
My kind of system.
That's right. That's right. And you only need 5 for a mug.
There you go.
So there you go. And a bunch of other stuff too. That there was a beautiful print. Was the print from was that Season 2 cover?
Yeah, it was the Season 2 art cover.
Season 2 art cover. There was a beautiful mounted print that I saw someone walking away with.
The other thing with the free play area, so over the last month or so, we've been running a narrative campaign, which is the Butcher's Civil War. So basically, Ox the captain disappeared at the end of Season 1, and it created a power vacuum in the guild. So Philip, the new captain, came in and started changing things up her way. And Brisket, one of the original kind of players, decided that she wasn't that keen on it. It didn't, it's taking it away from the old values. So these girls have come head to head, and they're working against each other. And the story's built up over the last 6 weeks or so. But in the free play area now, when you go to register for your free play results, you put a tick in the box for either Team Fillet or Team Brisket. And the exciting thing is the story is going to be driven and changed in the Season 3 book, depending on which faction wins within the Butcher's Civil War. So people who are actually playing in the free play are actually playing games that will affect the history of Guildball, which I think is pretty cool.
That's really cool. Yeah. And I love how you carried the theme through. So even when you register, you have to choose which team you're on, and then your badge matches your team. So you're already kind of dividing the crowd up into the two factions. I think it's awesome. So the team comes right from day one when you walk into the SteamCon. You're immediately engaged in that story, that narrative, which is really cool. Very cool. So we talked a lot about ways to play what's here. I love the session yesterday on design your own.
Did you enjoy that?
Yes. That was really clever. You guys. So for those who weren't there, obviously, you guys walked us through sort of your creative process and the brainstorming that leads down to some actual decision making around how you might start a guild.
Yeah.
And so the audience participated, came up with a crazy guild name. You guys,
the Rat Catchers,
which I thought was fantastic.
Yeah.
And now Russ, your lead sculptor, is going to go out and
He's done it.
It's already done.
It's already done?
So he sculpted it yesterday.
Where is it? I gotta go check this out.
So he sculpted it yesterday in one of the sessions. So we had a live sculpt with people in there talking about that. He's finished the sculpt off. We sent it to our 3D printers last night. So today there'll be a 3D printer arriving of the model.
So HL printer worked overnight, and he'll bring it in today.
Yeah.
Now it's cured off.
Very cool.
And I think there's a couple of guys going to be painting it today.
See, I have never seen that. So literally, your fans, your community designed a whole team, or the concept of the team. Your sculptors created it last night, and now a full mock-up painted model is going to be done by end of the day.
So I've got a session a little bit later on today, which is actually to design that character.
Yeah.
So we'll actually start talking about what specific abilities he can have and how his playbook can look and all that kind of stuff.
What do you think the likelihood is that this will actually become a real team?
Everyone keeps asking that now.
A real team? I don't know if I'd commit to a real team. Maybe
we definitely had sort of it could be some sort of Union-esque player.
I think Monk, the guy that we ended up with, named TBD, but the model looks great, and he could definitely work as a Union model.
There's something in there.
Morticians and the Brewers or something. That'd be
hangs out for a while, see what the appeal is. And that's cool. Yeah, that's really I've never seen it done before. That was really clever.
So it was a very accelerated process, and it is that brainstorming session that we did is something that I've done with other kind of podcasts and things like that as well. So it's designed to kind of encapsulate a process that actually takes quite a bit longer, obviously, but not much longer. I mean, this is one of the things that Rich and I are discovering. We work at the pace that feels natural to us. Turns out it's ridiculously quicker than a lot of other teams, and a lot of other companies seem to work at. So we can actually come up with an idea and turn it around and make it reality within weeks rather than months. So Kickoff.
Yeah, Kickoff was, it took from start of doing it to actual final production. It was 4 months. For a product like that, we usually put a 9-month development cycle in to get it right through. But we knew we had to hit this launch date, and we were back against it last year with the amount of projects we had coming up with the Dark Souls explosion, and we just hell for levered it, and we managed to get it out and get it produced and have it shipped worldwide, ready for today. So.
We talked a lot at Gen Con, and we mentioned the plastic models when I was talking about Gen Con on the show after we had coffee.
Yeah.
Rubbing elbows. Russ wasn't with us.
I was not there.
He was with his family. We were talking about the new transitioning some of the models to new plastics, and what you had said was what you wanted was a box that someone could find under the Christmas tree, open it, and 5 minutes later be playing Guildball.
Yeah.
And that has transitioned into this Kickoff box right now, which is, for all intents and purposes, a beautiful board game. You open it, it has a 3-foot by 3-foot board, nice cardboard board, like an actual board game, not a paper mat, an actual board. It's got full teams, so 6 models on either side in this new plastic. So it's a whole new product that you're talking about, where Rich was saying that in 4 months you went from concept to you have this beautiful box now being shipped all over the world. Where did that come from, and what was the goal for Kickoff?
So really early on in Guildball's lifetime, we knew that we wanted to do a 2-player starter set. It's the perfect onboarding product to introduce people to the game, and we also had looked at 2-player starter sets from other companies, and games that we've bought into as gamers, not just companies that we're looking at as, what are the competition doing, as it were. And it's one of the things that we do at Steamforged is we look at it from the gamer perspective rather than from a corporate perspective. So as a gamer, what do we actually want? So that was really the start of it. Right early on, we knew we wanted to do it. How can we do it in a way that's going to be the best for the guys who have actually bought it, ripped it open? And that's where we started to conceive this concept of Christmas Day test. And I think when you kind of talk about the Christmas Day test, and then you look at what other onboard, other start sets are, and you can actually start seeing where they maybe fell short, or whether they didn't go far enough, or they went too far. And it helps you kind of build a perspective of how you want to specifically target the product you're trying to make for that particular purpose. So that's where, so Rich really looks after the product development side of things. So he basically jumped on, started talking with manufacturers. We actually went over to China, didn't we?
Yeah, we did. We went over to China. We spent over a week there. Me and Matt just looking at the various types of plastics and what we can do over there, and we come away with that. We've seen some really cutting edge technology in that area to bring out the sharpness and the quality of the PVC material we're looking at. And when we come back and show the samples to the board and we went through it, it was like we'd found a direction, and we were really confident that this pre-assembled PVC with the quality of digital sculpts and the manufacturers we'd found, it really produced a really high grade model that we felt that our fan base are going to be like, yeah, this is really good. Like,
they're really impressive. I was looking at them yesterday, and what's interesting about them is they're essentially the same sculpts as the models you buy if you're buy the traditional the metal ones. But what's interesting about them is your metal models have so much fine detail on them. They're actually some of the trickier models to assemble, right? When you look at the smaller parts, it's like waving little hair and the shooting beer, and yet you captured it in these plastics. The exact same pieces are there, yet no assembly required. That's really impressive.
It really astounded us, of what they can do. And the kickoff set is probably about 70% because it's based off of where we can get to in quality, because it's based off our existing sculpts, which obviously were made for the metal market. Now, going forward, with the Farmers Guild, we are designing them specifically to work in this material. So we're going to be pushing that top end for that quality. So you're going to see deeper cuts, you're going to see more sharper lines, and there really are some stunning, the proofs that me and Matt have seen are really stunning.
So, when we were in China, we took the sculpting team with us. So I got to sit down with the sculpting team and the Chinese guys advising us on the manufacturing process. And
So they know from the very beginning what they're capable of.
So we learned so much about how models are put together, and when you know the limitation of a manufacturing process, you can actually understand the flip side of how to take
You can
most
optimize your
advantage of
sculpts
it. You
for it.
optimize
Exactly.
your sculpts for it. So what Rich is saying is is right. The masons and the brewers that are in the kickoff set are an adaptation of a metal miniature, and a metal miniature comes out, it flexes out of a mold.
Right.
Whereas when you're looking at plastic coming out, it needs to exit a lot more cleanly. So you do need to worry about draft lines and the angles of the draft and everything like that. So if you imagine like a torso. The body comes out in a certain direction. Now you can have quite a lot of detail in that
direction,
really, that vector. But anything going off to the side actually needs to be smooth coming out.
Right.
So, but what we understood was we can get a load of detail that way, a load of detail that way, and then what we'll do is build attachments that go on the side to kind of cover some of the smoother drafting. So. You would have like some belts or some satchels or some stuff like that. During the manufacturing process, it's really quick for them to just glue on and when they're assembling the piece for you. But you end up with a model that has detail all the way around as you would expect from a metal model, and yet it's in this PVC plastic. Wow. Did you mention that? So when we were out there was a moment where this guy that we were chatting to brought out this plastic, and we're like, "This is PVC." And it's sometimes the language barriers are different. You have to be very, very specific and very, very clear. Yeah, it's PVC. We're like, it don't look like PVC. This is like, really? PVC, this is PVC. Yes, yeah. And then it comes out, it's a new type of PVC that they've been developing that hardens a little bit more, so it actually retains more detail than a standard board game piece. I mean, you guys have played lots of board games, so super top end board games like Blood Rage and things like that, they're obviously made out of PVC and the best PVC. This new PVC is like the next generation, and that's what Rich was saying about. We were seeing stuff at the very cutting edge. These guys who own the factories wanted to show us the technology they had, and we kind of had this moment where we just looked at each other, and Rich and I have worked long enough with each other to kind of, a bit like you guys, know what each other is thinking. You're like, yeah, this is the one. So we got super excited about that, and that's the point where we started saying, do you know what? Rather than us making the farmers in hips, which was what we were originally planning to do, why don't we make it in this material? Why don't we make it pre-assembled? Why don't we make it the Christmas Day test for everything that we do going forward? So we started getting super excited.
I think you're really onto something there, because when we started really to talk about kickoff, and I just posted some pictures yesterday. Our audience is very broad, right? We have a lot of miniature gamers. We have a lot of board gamers too, and a lot of times the board gamers will see a cool miniature game like this, and they'll think that is perfect for me. I have this problem with my daughter. So my oldest daughter is a huge miniature gamer. She loves painting. The youngest daughter loves board games, hates miniatures, but she loves to see the games we play, but she won't play them even if I offer to paint them, because she's like, well, that's part of the hobby.
Right.
I don't want to not participate in part of the hobby. What you have now is, though, and when we post these pictures of kickoff, we got this response, which is, this looks amazing. Will they have any more variety that's accessible like this? Here's 2 of the teams, but I want to have more variety. And so it sounds like that's exactly the direction you're going. And I think you're really going to have I think it's going to be a very powerful response.
Well, we made, the Chinese trip was a wonderful trip for Rich and I, because getting yourselves out from the office, as you were, or the studio, does help to detach yourself a little bit and gives you some really clear thinking space. And I had a bit of an epiphany, didn't I? I was just thinking about our community and the guys who play our games, and trying to compartmentalize them into different categories to try and understand who we were actually making products for. Because I want to make a product for the people who actually want that product.
Right.
And we realised that we actually had quite a heavy focus on, sort of tournament-style gaming, very competitive. And you guys have played Guildball. Guildball is a wonderful game insofar as a demonstration of player skill, not player ability to search the internet for the most powerful list and then turn up with that list. So if you are good, then you will win more games. And if you are less good or less practiced, you won't win as many games until you get good.
Right.
But it does create this kind of hard compression, so if you're playing a top player, it's very, very difficult for you to beat them, and yet people still want to turn up to tournaments. So clearly the motivation isn't to win all the time, so we're trying to understand who these people are and what they're talking about. And this is where we had the idea of the Steamforged survey, and talk about that a bit more in a minute, but we then realised that actually a majority of the guys who play our game aren't that top slice of tournament. Conversely, aren't that other slice of sort of top tier painters. Actually, they're just a bunch of guys and girls who just like playing games and hanging out. So we had a real epiphany at that point, didn't we? Where we're sitting at breakfast.
I think when we're talking, and we were like, well, how could this materialise? Like, what does this look like in our product range? And so we took the farmers. We thought, well, this is a great starting point, for us. Like, this is an opportunity for us to do pre-assembled miniatures. We'd already had kickoff, so we knew that was coming. But that could be, kickoff could be seen as like, oh, it's just the intro product. But actually, Guildball, it is, if we make this move, to these kind of models with the Farmers Guild and potentially the other teams as well, going forward into 2018, then I think it's going to really open the game up. And I think it's only good for everyone, the more people that play this game. Because I think
we realised, didn't we, that in a way, I mentioned earlier, our competitors, we're not really competing product for product. What you're actually competing with, and it's not just other board games and war games manufacturers, it's video game manufacturers, it's Facebook, you got it, it's time. And certainly gamers of our age and our generation, as we get older, more responsibility, kids, jobs, wives, houses, everything, time is the most precious resource. So, if it's true that a majority of people are just interested in playing the game, if we can accelerate them into that faster, that's a better thing for the majority of our people, the community. So do we want people to spend 2 hours putting a team together, sticking them together, drilling the bits? And as you say, some of our early models were quite fiddly. We were learning our craft. But taking it to the extreme, you literally get your team. I love the look of the butchers. Yeah. It's there in a single box, shiny. You can see them all through the cellophane. Yep. You get it, you rip it out, and you put them down, and then you're playing within minutes. Right. That's the dream. So, but it blurs the line between is it a miniature game now? Is it a board game? Right. Actually, we don't care. It's a game.
As long as people play the games, Steamforged, we represent the thing me and Matt are good at, and the company's good at, is we make great games. We stand by that, and as long as we can focus on that and give that enjoyment to people, that's what we want. Matt mentioned the survey, and we did that recently, and 77% of our audience, which is a huge chunk, voted the number one to responses was, I play Guildball for the gameplay. Like, it's all about the gameplay and enjoying it. So it was a real indicator for us that the decisions we've made, going to China and making these routes, actually is really supported, by our community. So, we couldn't be happy with the response we're getting for this change.
I love it. And we talked in the last chapter about your data-driven philosophy, and I'd love to dive in more. And we did a little bit on your survey approach. That's really interesting.
So the goal is really, if possible, the potential goal is to transition the entire game into the new PVC.
That's the direction that we're heading in. Yeah.
And so conceivably, there are teams that have way more than 6 models.
Yes.
So there'd be a starter box, and then even the individual blisters would still be, so that would be
we've got a little bit of a different rollout. So from April next year, you're gonna see this new rollout starting with the farmers, and you're gonna see a 6-man box for the farmers. The next product will be a 4-man expansion box. And we'll look to, for the current range and how we can maybe convert that over to a similar style. And then as we go forward in 2018, obviously we'll start to look at, how do we potentially transition them to this new material as well and being pre-assembled.
It might be something as simple as, so this is all still slightly up in the air, but let's take Morticians. You play Morticians, so you'd have Obulus and his guys, the 6 guys, so you can rip that out and play that straight out the gate. And then there'll be another half box, which will be Scalpel and the 3 guys or girls that she brings to the team, in the fluff. And then that gives us a nice expansion route. So if we want to do a new captain, bring a few new guys that help support that captain's style of gameplay, and yet also intermingle with the other teams. So
that could drive your fluff too. That could drive the story elements.
I love it. It comes all together. It's great. Yeah. And you mentioned earlier how it broadens the appeal of the game, and it makes it more accessible for those folks who really are interested in the gameplay rules. But I think it helps the miniature gamers out too. I've been playing a lot of these, what we've been calling on the show, hybrid board games, where the board game comes with lots of great miniatures in it, made out of high-end PVC like that. What I've discovered as a painter about this is I don't like assembly that much.
Right.
As I get older, assembly is not fun for me. And I know there's guys out there who are kit bashers and they convert stuff, all those former orc players and everything. I get all that. Yeah. And there's still a lot of fun to be had there. But generally speaking, I like to get right to painting. Yeah. And so I think this is very appealing for the painter as well. And the miniature side of the hobby, now you've got more folks to play against also. So you've got a bigger base, more likely to see more teams, more likely to get more people playing your game with you, which is a win for everyone, even if you're a painter who also likes to play. So I think it's
you painted one of the models yesterday.
I did, I sat down in the free play area, and I literally just I picked a paintbrush up. It's been a long time since I've been able to sit down and paint. Right. Matt kind of jokes about it, but Matt will paint in directors' meetings and sit there just to get a model and paint away and do some amazing in an hour. I rarely get time to paint. I should make more time. So I sat down and I cracked a copy of Kickoff open. I picked up I think it was brick out of the set and just put some paint on. I was astounded. Like, I was sat next to one of our players, Trent Dennison, who's a great painter, and he picked Hooper up out of the set as well. And within an hour, he had something there that I'd be like, I have no idea if this was,
You wouldn't be able to tell.
I couldn't tell. Like,
no.
Even our pro painter that we've got this weekend, James, he kind of said, he's airbrushing the setup as well. So he brought up, and he went, there's no way I can tell it, what it is. And so to have that from the kickoff set, I cannot wait to see what people think of the farmers when they come.
I think it's fantastic. I think that definitely the attention to detail and making sure you had the right material and the right manufacturing process shows. I mean, the teams look great. The 2 colors are very, the colors are well chosen too. A lot of people choose colorblind, non-sensitive colors. You guys were careful about that. The blue and yellow look great. What were some of the other design challenges around achieving that Christmas Day appeal? Was the primary challenge the miniatures, or were there other things as you think about what? Because it's the same mechanics as Guildball. It's not like a simplified version of the game. It's Guildball in a box. How did you achieve that?
I think one of the things that is interesting is the way we look to teach people how to play the game. And Guildball or Kickoff comes with basically 3 booklets in it, and one is the actual full rule set. Don't read that one, first of all. Read the book that says "Read me" first, because that's the one that actually steps players through. So now, your dad sitting down with son or daughter on Christmas Day ooh, I don't know how to play this game. But there's a book that actually says, right, put the models out like this. Right, this model's called Honor. She's really good at doing this kind of stuff. Grab her, move her forward. This is how you move. And it literally feeds you through the key mechanics of the game in a narrative way.
I have to say that book is brilliant. So I read this book. I read the book last night. These guys were teasing me because we came into SteamCon yesterday, and we watched some of the stuff, and then all of a sudden Craig and I disappeared. And it's because I ran off.
No, Craig didn't disappear.
I disappeared.
Craig was committed to design a guild seminar.
Well, I got back. I saw that, but then I ran off and bought the kickoff box. And then in the evening, between sort of like lunch and dinner, I consumed that book. And what I thought was great about it was I saw exactly what you guys were doing there. It was really interesting. So it's not just sort of you didn't take the approach where these are the simplified rules and then go to the advanced rules. It's really set the board up this way, and then you actually drive a narrative and tell stories. Mm-hmm. So like it actually says, this character's going to go here, and then she's going to snap the ball back to this person. This person's going to go here, and I'm not even... It's almost like I'm just moving the models on the board and following the instructions. Mm. But what's cool about it is it gets you really passionate and engaged for all the things you can do in this game. Even if I don't know all the details of the rules, and by the time I'm done with those 5 or 6 or 7 pages, I know enough to be dangerous, and I'm also engaged enough to want to find out more.
Well, this is my favourite part about that book is the bit where we take the hand off the wheel.
Yes.
And it's not at the end of the game.
It's in the middle.
It's right in the middle. It's like, well, now you know enough to carry on.
Because in the beginning it's like, assume she succeeds, assume this, and then all of a sudden I notice halfway through it's like, now roll. If she fails, do this. If she succeeds, do that. And all of a sudden it's like a make your own adventure. As you go along, it's guiding you, and by the end, the trading wheels are off. Yeah. And I thought it was I've never seen a tutorial quite done that way. It was really well done.
There's a lot of video game tutorials I've developed over the years in my career that video game tutorials are much more sophisticated than board game and war game kind of starter instructions. So we used a lot of those techniques to just lead you through and step you through and show you one thing once, emphasize it a little bit later on, confirm it a little bit later on. So it's always a 3-step process for every key mechanic as you're going through. But also, the closest that we've seen that was really inspired was the Crossmaster set.
Yeah, that's a great
rule set in that was fantastic, and that really kind of that's great. So we want to do something like that, and we want to bring all this video game development experience and knowledge in as well. And that's what you ended up with is this rule set that we hope that dads and mums around the world are going to have much less pressure now to be able to show their kids how to play this game. But
great. And then the box also though comes with all the tokens that you'll need.
Yes.
It comes with great dice. The dice look beautiful. So it really, right out of the box, you have everything you need. Measuring sticks for all.
So this one got me too. So I was like, Craig, we got to play right now. And then so I was going through it, and Craig was like, "Wait a minute, we don't have any of those." Or I said, "We don't have any of the dry erase markers."
Right.
So how are we going to mark the cards without dry erase markers? But then you guys added the dials. Right.
Yeah.
So how did the dials come to be? And
they're Rich's baby.
Yeah, I mean, like I've loved seeing dials in games start to appear, and I think it's kind of been a subculture in a lot of kind of the miniature games that people have been doing, like pre-purchase them after to hold mark and damage and. We were sat there, and this was a conundrum. It was like, how do we, not... Because I don't want to put a dry erase in there, because I think it takes away, again, from that board game. I see in that it's very alien kind of technology, that's not accepted.
The more we learn about the business, there's weird places like California that just don't let you ship anything there.
Pretty much.
Don't ship a pen here. No way.
It's not that far from the truth, man. But it causes problems, that kind of thing. So we were like, well, what can we do? So I was like, we can do health dials, and I think it's a way that we can include them in the box. We can still put the damage circles on the cards, so if people want to do the traditional way, they can do. But honestly, I've been using them now from that kickoff set, and I absolutely love them because I find in Guildball, generally when you're damaging someone, you're either taking them out or you're going to leave them with a couple of health, and you tend to have these damage dials on the side, and you're putting 1 or 2 around. It doesn't clutter the board. It's very obvious visually. When you look over the opponent, well, he's definitely damaged, and it's more that giving information, which I know Matt's really big on. It's how do you look over your opponent and see exactly what the state of the game is? So I'm a massive fan of these health dials. So
really is there a thought maybe of moving to dials for all the different models?
So the Farmers Guild will be coming with health dials.
Really?
So
Shipping,
the new teams are going to come with die cut tokens. So you're going to get the their influence tokens, the tokens relevant to that 6-man set, and the health dials in there as well. So again, that kind of feeling you get with the kickoff set, we're trying to emulate even with our guild sets.
There's that hybrid board game miniatures game feel again, where you've got it's an expansion.
Yes.
So you've got everything you need for that expansion. That's great.
Yeah.
Really good. Well, so how are you? How did the launch yesterday go? I mean, how did you feel about? I know you were killing yourself basically to get this thing. So right from the beginning, you're like, this is going to be ready for SteamCon.
Yeah.
That was the mission. And how down to the wire was it?
We air freighted the first lot in. I know that the copies of Kickoff landed probably 2 weeks ago, and we had to get them around the world because obviously it was a worldwide launch of that product. So that was tricky. The terrifying one was the player card decks, because they were a pre-release, and obviously everyone's talking about Season 3. They arrived on Tuesday, so literally they come in from the thankfully they got through customs. There was no stopping, but that was how close to the wire. And we really, like I said, it's not just me and Matt. Our team really do pull hours and hours. Like I know Alex, our design, our Dark Souls guy, he's up till 4 a.m. just prepping that prototype set before setting off for this. So we couldn't be happy with our team.
Work like Trojans.
Yeah, absolutely amazing.
Funny you mentioned the cards. I have to say how pleased I was with the. Did you get to the SteamCon mixer on Friday night?
No, we were playing the Dark Souls.
You were playing Dark Souls. So I had this. So I went out to Australia and. I just fit in with the Australians. Australians are a very unique set of people, but they have so many parallels with English guys, and I'm quite an atypical kind of blokey English guy from sort of southeast of England, and it's all about good cars and like going out and having a good time. And Australians are just like this, so I really connected with them, and I got this nickname Steamy. That was my Australian nickname. So come back and I said, I don't think SteamCon should be called SteamCon anymore. I think it should be called SteamyCon.
which I had to fight against for about 8 months.
So 8 months of me kind of, sort of championing the name SteamyCon, getting loads of the community to kind of buy in and start calling it, referring it always as SteamyCon. What we actually decided to do was on the Friday night was an icebreaker.
Yep.
So we called it SteamyCon, and I had this idea where. I just remember at school where you're trading Pokemon, or you're trading we call them match attack, like soccer player cards. You must have like football player cards or baseball player cards. So I had this idea of come up with a limited edition design for the player cards. It's the exact same stats, mix them all up, and everyone gets half a dozen in an envelope. And the idea is you go around talking to people, trying to do trades, and hopefully you might talk to someone that you wouldn't normally talk to. Yeah. And I'm thinking, that works. That's a great idea. And SteamyCon went down there. There was people swapping cars. There's people going around hustling cars, doing trades and everything. But everyone's talking to each other, and it's fantastic. So those come in at the last minute as well.
Yeah.
We actually had a heart lurch. I had a heart lurch where I went, has someone done SteamCon cards? Which is like, no, I've got you. And so he kind of stayed up with our graphic design guys did a late night and pulled those all together.
We got a really nice kind of SteamCon limited edition card format, I think, that's going to definitely run for these events. It's nice to have a show like this and do something kind of fun like that within the show, and then promote it with our own kind of stuff. So you come to SteamCon, you're going to get stuff like that just isn't outside the convention. It's not going to hurt people, because we were really big on our limited edition models. We want to make sure that everyone always has access to those if they can't get to the show. But there's still going to be a few little kind of nice things, and alt art cards are definitely one of those things we can do. So
nice. So that's fantastic. So that was one of the big things, the cards, which I think was cool, the limited edition cards. And of course, Season 3 was a huge event going on this weekend. Did everything come together for that you were hoping for?
It did, yeah. We literally, with the card decks come in, the plot decks all come in time. Just I mean, the store this morning, it was insane. People queuing up just to kind of get these. We have to limit to one per person. We have literally got just enough to survive the attendance.
But I think
that's great though. So everyone will get one.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is
That's
awesome,
what we're making sure. So it's awesome. It's a pre-release. So again, like Matt said, we want to make sure that SteamCon is that people come to this and know it's going to the first time they're going to be really exposed to the new season. So it's really important for us to make sure this is the event they see it at.
And what we try and also do, though, we recognise that we're really lucky. We've got people all around the world playing the game, and so this is why we do live streaming. We encourage people to kind of take pictures, tweet them, get it out on Facebook. We obviously, our social media is going 24 hours a day, just to make sure that those guys who couldn't get over this time still feel like they can be a part of the process. So the world is changing. It's very easy to be a global event now for a very small company. It doesn't take much. So.
I think it's it's nice. In the keynote we announced we've got SteamCon US next year. Which is massive. So the fact we're going to be doing hopefully within a week of each other. Me and Matt are going to fly.
Back weekends.
Yeah, it's going to be UK one week and US the other, and then in a year's time it might be an EU one in there as well. So we're trying as much as possible to really get ourselves into these key locations and spread the SteamCon. Doing a kind of a split keynote next year is going to be amazingly fun. Getting some spoilers at one and then the rest of the US one.
Yeah,
it's going to be awesome.
Oh, that's crazy. That's cool.
Yeah,
very good. Well, of course, the other big thing was Dark Souls.
Yeah,
right.
Which has been a big thing for you for a while.
It's been big. Yeah.
Tell us a little about that journey. I mean, I don't think we've had a chance to sit down with you guys.
Oh, okay.
In a while.
So like as you know, I've got a few contacts in video games, having worked in there for sort of 15, 20 years, and we were actually at a licensing show in London, and we were walking past the Namco stand, and I saw someone that I knew, and but they were in a meeting, so I just left my card, just sort of say, hey, just say Matt said hi, and we get a call back from this guy, and he's like, oh yeah, sorry I missed you, blah blah blah. Are you guys interested in the Dark Souls license at all? And I'm like, yeah, maybe.
Sure, we can make that work.
So we had a conversation, and what we quickly did was put together a pitch for an idea that we'd already been working on. So Rich and I had already been looking at like the dungeon explorer genre of board game, and quite frankly had got quite frustrated with a lot of the products that were out there. We couldn't find that game that did it the way that we felt that genre could be done. So we had already started working on some ideas about boss AI decks and the way that the exploration can be a lot more accelerated and a lot more tactical. And rather than it being scenario driven, and I know you played a lot of Descent, and a lot of the things I find frustrating with Descent is scrabbling around for 18B. You never 18B, God, where are you?
The setup takes forever,
and the setup takes forever, and you have to rely on the guy behind the screen, as it were, and I always end up being that guy, and because I'm quite a heavy role player as well, I tend to not necessarily fight it. As a hard battle. Is more I just want to kind of play the scenario out for the guys. It's more
Russ
of a
knows a little bit about that.
Yeah. So there's lots of these different facets. So it's not that they're bad. It's just that it wasn't quite scratching the itch that I wanted it to scratch. So anyway, scroll forward. Shuhei had basically said, "Can you put together a pitch? Can you get me a deck over?" And I'll start talking to From Software about it. So we put it together, went out and sent it to him. He said, "This is great. I need a playable demo." So Rich got his scissors out and started cutting out bits of paper.
Literally, we were cutting out. I remember I rang the sculptor, and I think it was you were on holiday, I think, because it literally like a day's holiday, and it was the Thursday night, and I said, Russ, he said, yes, I need the biggest of biggest favours. I need an entire dancer model from Dark Souls doing overnight, and I need it by the Saturday morning.
Wow.
And he's like, I can't do it. There's no way I can do it.
I cannot do it, Captain.
It's pretty much a typical Russ, and then comes the Friday night, he's like, there you go, it's done. So we got it into the printer, very similar to what we're doing this weekend with the advancing the model through.
We kit bashed a warrior and
kit bashed the other stuff. Yeah, we went round. I literally raided the local game store, kit bashing this up, and I rammed up to Matt's house. I drove down there to London with this box of I've done it, Matt. We've got a sample. Let's go. So we're like, right. We literally did a quick flight printing. I got the graphic design to do the stuff, and within literally about 3 or 4 days, we had a working prototype of what we've been working on.
So we went to Namco London.
Yeah.
Did the demo with Shuhei. Shuhei loved it. But he did have a really his dice rolling technique needs a little bit of work. So when you have a hard table service, do not drop your dice from 3 feet up because they go everywhere. So but he loved it, had a great time, and while he was doing that, we were taking lots of photos of the game state. Quickly put together a walkthrough that he could get translated because, of course, From Software is a Japanese company, so we have this language barrier. And he got that over to From Software, and the presentation went all the way up to the very top. They loved it, signed off on it, and the minute that the guy at the top signs off on something, all tape and red tape just disappears, and now we're on this like lovely trajectory of like, right, go. Can you get it done by April?
April.
So and this is again, like we do with Kickoff, Dark Souls. We just burnt the midnight oil. Got everything pulled together, ready for the launch to coincide with the launch of the main game, and the Kickstarter went off like a skyrocket and blew us all away. So, it's great. You look at the numbers and you think fantastic. That puts us in a brilliant position as a company. We have a lovely, stable financial position. Wonderful. We've got 40,000 fans who are expecting the best game possible. That is a terrifying responsibility for us to have. So, we're lucky to have a brilliant design team. DC came on board he was doing his design consultancy, Clockwork Phoenix, previously at PP. So brought acres of experience with him. The guys that we already had in the team. And we went and kind of disappeared into the hills in Yorkshire. No, was it Yorkshire? No, it was the Lake District.
It was Lake District.
Lake District. So we're in this cottage, rolling hills, beautiful. I brought my dog, and we just stayed there for a week. And we'd get up at 7 in the morning, have a quick coffee, have a quick bite to eat, and just start designing. And we did a 6-day design.
6-day session. Yeah. We probably covered about 6 months of design work.
Easily. So we just lived, breathed Dark Souls. We'd get to about 7, 8 o'clock in the evening, and generally I'd go and cook because I hate washing up. So I'd cook, but I'm not washing anything up. So I'd go off and cook a meal, we'd all sit down and eat together, and then we'd break out the board game. So we played a bit of Blood Rage, played a bit of Forbidden Stars, and all that kind of stuff. So it was a really great week. But what we came out of it was a really solid common understanding of the core game and our initial pass at all the player stats and the monster stats and everything like that. And what's really encouraging is that then went into the dev team, and DC's the development manager, and Alex was the lead developer that we assigned to it. They then worked on pulling the rest of the product out and play testing it and getting it all lined up. So Rich and I get to kind of dip in at review points all along the way, but when we got to sit down last night and play that full experience, on the cameras with all the tokens printed out, and all right, they were cut out to look like they're going to look like, but that was the first kind of
That's the first time you guys get to sit down and actually play with
the kind of final prototype.
Nice. So we played with a lot of kind of plain paper stuff, and it's very different playing a printed out Excel spreadsheet, or bits of cardboard tokens that you're moving about. To do the full colour dress rehearsal, and it was live on camera. It was a brilliant experience, and the game is the game that we envisaged at the pitch. It's now grown and polished, but it's that game, and it's fantastic. It's such a brilliant feeling. So, we couldn't be more happy with what we've done as a team, and we couldn't be more happy with the reactions that we're getting from people who play. I mean, you guys played it. You enjoyed it, right?
It was fantastic. We had a great time. Yeah. It's got that combination that is kind of rare in a co-op game where it's extremely collaborative. You don't have the alpha gamer kind of taking over the table. Everybody was talking about what to do. Yeah. And you also have that great nail biter, though. There were several stand-up die roll, many. It felt like almost every other turn there was a stand-up die roll, like, oh, God, and you just don't... In co-op games, you don't always feel that,
No.
And it's really grabbed that.
And the leveling up was awesome, too, the way that it's done across the board so that you feel like you're constantly getting better. And very quickly you get a grasp on... Like, for instance, maybe we wanted to spend a little more time boosting our dexterity.
Maybe. Like all of you.
Maybe all of you.
Or one of us.
Just
one of us.
In the walls. But it's funny, because in the game that we played, our warrior ended up with a great axe, and he had a lot of defense. He ended up being more tanky than the knight and doing a load of damage. But the way the game works is you can't just have that superhero guy,
right?
Because you're as strong as your weakest link,
right.
and for long periods of the game we played, my character was the weakest link. No assassin gear came out, nothing came out that I could get. There's no point leveling me up, so I was walking around with just like a pointy stick, going, "Aha, I'm assassin!" And I was getting wiped, wasn't I, every time? And it wasn't my fault. I mean, the first one.
No, definitely was.
Well, the other thing it captured three things that made it really obvious that someone who loves video games built this. The one I thought was Craig's point, like the card, each player's player mat has that great inventory section and that great sort of your stats section, which feels exactly like that screen in the video game you sort of pause and go to, right? So you know exactly what you have. But the second thing that's sort of true in very modern video games now, you know, in older video games, because they came from role-playing games, all your characters are locked in archetype. You're playing the knight, you're playing the assassin, you're playing the... But in more current video games, right, your character, depending on what you do, your character can morph into something else. And we had that happen where I was playing the warrior and I turned into a paladin.
Right.
And you were playing an assassin that turned into a wizard.
Right.
And so it was just based on what you got and how you leveled up. And so your character, and I can imagine the replayability's got to be extremely high because, of course, the assassin's not always going to be a wizard and the knight's not always going to be, your knight was something different. So I love that aspect of the game too, where you could really craft your characters and how you wanted them.
I mean, we had DC, he ended up with a knight walking around with like fireball spell.
Which he made a fighter mage. So the whole thing is very much that. And then the third part I thought was really brilliant is the respawning of the areas and the boss pattern cards, which gave it a quintessentially video game feel, where like you die and go back to the checkpoint. You're like, I got to fight through those rooms, but you also get a chance to level up.
Yes.
And to Craig's point, there's a lot more. This is one of the things that I think a lot of the dungeon crawl games haven't quite got right. They either have too much of it to the point where it doesn't feel realistically the right amount, or more commonly now where you don't really level up that much, and so there's only a very slight service
like
pay.
a vague nod.
A nod to the fact that you're leveling up, it's minor. Where with this one, that every round where you got the campfire, you know, is a moment of this whole game could change for me.
Choice.
Which is great.
And it's the attributes. You can power up the attributes, but also a lot of those abilities shift who you are functionally, like we said. So my assassin, who would have been awesome, by the way, with a really cool weapon, turns into a fireball and lightning mage because I've got all those extra stuff. And then you had like a healing spell all of a sudden, and it really is. It doesn't just feel like, okay, now I've got a better sword. It like can functionally change entirely how you play from one time through to the next. Each time you get sent back to the camps.
But the other thing with that, you know, as you say, do you want to go back and reset all the encounters? What you're actually doing with that, though, is it enables us to kind of make it more balanced as you go through.
Right.
What the challenge that you find an awful lot of the time is the first. You want an encounter to feel hard at the beginning, the first time you encounter it, but as you get better and as you understand it more, and as you figure it out and you have tactics, it should become easier.
Right.
But the later encounters that you're now getting to should feel as fresh as the first ones did. So.
And it has that feeling too. So you go back in the room and you remember where your rooms are now.
Yeah.
So you're like, well, this is the easy room.
You get your tactics.
But then, of course, you get overconfident. Someone does something stupid, and you realize you just burnt extra. Would you really just waste our spot?
But it was. I mean, it really felt like a video game towards the end, where the third time we went into this one room. We're like, okay, so we know the giant archer's going to be there, so we got to you're going to be there, and then it was like, boom, 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 okay, we're out of that room.
Yeah.
And it really
you
is
feel
that
good
sort
doing
of,
that, though.
it gives you a little rush.
Yeah.
And it was great, and the boss fight was also perfect. It had that very video game feel.
Well, it wasn't perfect.
Well, it was
perfect. If I hadn't died, it would be perfect.
But it was perfect from the point of view of how the boss functioned, right? So it had that very much feel of like, he fights in sort of a pattern.
Yep.
And if I can learn the pattern...
But it makes sense.
But it makes sense. It's not in a crazy pattern, and if I can learn the pattern, I can be in the right spot, but then his pattern will change.
Yeah.
It really felt exactly like one of those boss fights in Dark Souls, the video game, and in many others. It was just a really captured...
It also feels terrifying when that thing's moving around that room.
Oh, yeah.
It's like, where the hell do I go?
It's such a small room. I can't go anywhere.
And the funny thing was, Russ, right off the bat, was like, okay, in a video game, you never go for the big kill. Everybody just go for the little nicks. And then I took a shot, and it was a lucky shot. I didn't need it, but I was like, oh, and then if I roll again, I can get one more point of damage, and so I'm going to use my luck. So I use my reroll. I get 1 point of damage. I'm like, yay! And I fail my dodge, and I'm like, I don't have a reroll. The game's over. Oh.
Yeah. But it's funny you say that. So the Titanite Demon, which I know you guys were playing and we played as well, in Dark Souls is the kind of boss that you need to just chip away at.
Yeah.
He's very heavily armored. It's a game of attrition, and the best way to beat that boss in our game and in the video game is conserve your energy, take advantage when you can, do a couple of points of damage, get back safe. You know, make sure you make your dodge rolls, and don't go for the big kills. But there are other bosses in Dark Souls that it's the opposite is true.
So the Dancer, for instance, that's all about, you know, when you fight that, it's about speed. You've got to take that down quick, because the longer it goes on, the worse that fight's going to get for you.
Right.
So and this is the thing that I find quite thrilling. So, you know, my role as creative director is just to think about these big pictures and try and help build these mechanics that allow variation in gameplay, and then to see the guys able to pull the levers and out comes a boss that feels this way, and pull different levers and out comes a boss that feels a very different way from the same kind of game mechanics is wonderful. Right. So, you know, I'm super happy with the way the spread of the guys are coming out now.
Great.
Now, is there any kind of a campaign element inside the original box, or is it just so there is?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a full campaign system. The guys spent quite... I mean, this is an interesting one. Is all the way through the Kickstarter, people were demanding, like, are you going to do a campaign? And, like, we were really trying to show them, like, we don't need a campaign as such. Right. Like, we've got a vision of how it, you know, it's come together. You know, this system we built is actually quite one where you can choose the mini or the main boss you fight. You can choose how you actually play this game. It's quite a free-form system. However, on the kind of last day of the Kickstarter, we had a lot of feedback on it, and we felt we could offer that to them. Yeah. So we offered it out to the community. We said, look, we're going to put a campaign system in there, you know, because we can build it, so we'll put it in. We offered it out. We put an email address there and said, send your ideas in as well. We'll take feedback. We were inundated with ideas, and it's just fantastic to see. Again, you know, our 40,000 backers giving that input, and the guys have done a great job. So they've took that input and they've made some really nice kind of campaign systems, you know, for those gamers. I mean, there was an update a couple of days ago just detailing the overall picture of the campaign and how it works and everything. So it's definitely one to check out on the Kickstarter page for the full the breakdown on it.
Fantastic. So, what's the status of Dark Souls right now? Obviously, people are getting their first chance to really play it here at SteamCon, which is fantastic. Are you still on target for middle next year?
We had a few little changes. We wanted everything out for April. That wasn't possible. You know, we had to be realistic with that. We were looking at the deliverables, and the most sensible option for us was actually to do a split ship. So the stretch goals and the add-ons will be coming out in October next year. However, we are going to be able to ship the main game, the core set, in March. So we're actually ahead. Wow. So
that's awesome.
To have this side of Kickstarter and be able to ship early.
It's important to say that. So when we planned the Kickstarter and we set our estimated dates, it was based entirely on the core game.
Yeah, sure, you don't know how crazy it's going to get, right?
We don't know how crazy it's going to get. So when you know, the success brought problems.
Yeah.
You know, and not the least of which is to give it some degree of context. A factory in China can produce around about 10,000 units a month. So you kind of imagine, well, it's a factory; they can do 1 billion units a second, can't they? But actually, it's 10,000 units a month. So now we've got to make 40,000 units just for the Kickstarter, not to mention the retail release and everything like that. So we had to make that kind of decision of, well, you know, this is getting the product out and getting it out on the timelines that we had originally envisaged is important to us. That is the core game. That is what we're going to put out first to satisfy that. We just didn't anticipate how many add-ons we were going to unlock and how many units we were going to have to produce for that, which is why we've had to put it into two splits. You know, or we have to split the shipment. But it's one of those that we knew what we were planning and what we were anticipating and what we presented. I think we've done pretty good, actually.
I think you know, once when we announced it and that split shipment, obviously people are always going to disappoint if you can't do delivery on time. But you know, a lot of people on the Kickstarter comments were very supportive and said, "Look, a project this size, the biggest board game Kickstarter ever, that's going to ship March, a month earlier than they said the core game." Like, you know, people saying, "I've been waiting 5 years for some of my Kickstarter projects." Like, they're nowhere near the size of this. So, I mean, we're super happy. Like, you know, and our manufacturing partners have really worked hard for us to get the quality out and just to make sure that this set is so good. And I think once people get the main core game, I mean, there's so much replayability, like you've seen, just in that core set, that people, it's going to last enough.
It's going to be like Christmas all over.
It's going to be, when the rest of their stuff comes in October, it's just going to be a beautiful Christmas for those guys.
Yeah. Great. Now, to put things in perspective, currently on the top 10 board game Kickstarters of all time, at the moment, where did Dark Souls fall?
At the moment, we are number one.
Number one.
Yeah.
So
it may have changed by the time
we don't. I preferred this game to that game.
We'll definitely still have the most number of backers. I'm pretty confident with that. Yeah. So we have a huge number of backers.
Crazy success.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
Yeah, it's brilliant.
Well, guys, thank you so much for getting us out here, because this has been a fantastic time.
Thanks for
love it, and being able to spend time with you guys and in the amazing community.
And thank you to your wives and families for letting you out to play on Thanksgiving.
Yes, we appreciate that. We will pass that along.
Please do. Yeah.
But thanks so much. We're looking forward to spending the rest of the SteamCon here with you guys.
And so the next segment is going to be with some designers and some sculptors, hopefully, and we'll talk more about Dark Souls. So we'll probably be saying goodbye to you guys here. Is there anywhere, not for the weekend, just for the show, anywhere they can go to look and see what you guys are up to, or where the latest information about Steamforged is?
Yes.
Always Steamforged.com.
Steamforged.com's got everyone there, and our Facebook. Just type Steamforged in Facebook, you'll get us up.
Okay,
great.
Awesome.
Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you.
This is Total Fangirl. Regular Jane most days, total fangirl when the moment strikes. Han shot first. Starbuck is a guy. And Lestat, now there's a vampire. Hey everyone, this is Nicole, your Total Fangirl. You can follow me on Twitter at Nicole Wakeland and check out my blog, TotalFangirl.com. Our shout out is to all of our wonderful supporters over at Patreon. Head to patreon.com/the D6 Generation, and you too can support the show. So a really big movie is getting really, really close. I'm sure you guys know it. You're a bunch of nerds. So Rogue One, it comes out on December 16th. It is just weeks away at this point. People are buying tickets and people are getting all kinds of excited. And it's like everyone's holding their breath for it, and the previews look amazing. And I'm pretty excited about this movie. I mean, it does look really good. I think the Star Wars franchise is going strong, and I'm pretty excited. But there's also, coming out in almost exactly a year, on December 15th of next year, of 2017, we're going to have Star Wars Episode 8. And maybe we'll finally get to see Luke Skywalker actually, say something. So people are talking about it, and a lot of people are more excited for Rogue One because it just looks sort of different. It looks sort of a little darker. It's sort of like a whole new story in the universe that we all know, and people are really excited about it. And it's almost like Episode 8 sort of getting shuffled off to the side, like, there's this story with these Jedi Knights and stuff, but let's find out how things started, just a little bit more detail, a little bit more about how those plans to the Death Star got stolen, a little bit more about how, all these, the rebels got their start and what was happening before and in between what we saw in the original trilogy. And it's exciting, but I don't know. I can't decide whether I'm happier to see Rogue One or I'm more excited about finally getting to see what on earth happened to Luke Skywalker. And I was talking with some friends who were sort of taking a poll, and Rogue One was winning. Like, more people are excited to see Rogue One and see what it's all about than they are excited to see Episode 8, which is kind of surprising because, everyone was so excited for Episode 7, and it did amazingly well, and it was a fantastic movie, and I think most Star Wars fans agreed that it was good, despite things here and there you might not have liked. It was really, really well done. So you kind of figure that 8 would be like the next big thing. But no, Rogue One may have stolen its spotlight. So I'm really curious, and as far as Russ has already purchased tickets, and if he hasn't, and he's editing this episode of the show, which I believe is happening the night that I'm recording it, dude, buy the tickets. That's one of your jobs. You have the fancy app and all the points and blah, blah, blah on your phone. Buy us some tickets so we can go see this movie. So I'm excited to see Rogue One on December 16th of this year, but I'm still excited to see Episode 8 and find out what happens with our heroes, or those that are left, when that comes out on December 15th of next year. And I'd be curious to know what you think. Which movie are you more excited for? Which movie is the one you think is going to be just amazing beyond all reason? Is it going to be Rogue One, or is it going to be Star Wars Episode 8?
Hey everyone, it's time to talk now about our friends over at Geek Nation Tours. Now, if you're at a computer, if you're in your car, just remember one thing, geeknationtours.com. But if you're at a computer, go to geeknationtoursrightnow.com and click on the Tours button right near the top of the webpage. And this is really the easiest way to describe the awesome that is Geek Nation Tours. On this page, you're going to see just tile after tile of all the amazing upcoming tours, the amazing places that maybe as a geek you haven't even thought about, the places you could go to see all the different crossover with both seeing a new place and just, learning about a place and just experiencing the joy of travel, but then also understanding how it ties into your passion, your hobbies, whether that hobby is zombies, whether it's anime, whether it's Doctor Who, whether it's Indiana Jones, Lord of the Rings. Geek Nation Tours has fantastic tours that really take you to the places where these films or other passions occurred, and then you just really see the little nuances, the little elements that make it fantastic. And what's really great about it is, even if you go to New Zealand or whatever and see all the Lord of the Rings stuff with your family, maybe not everybody in your family is a total geek. Imagine going there with a bunch of people who are all geeks like yourself and are really totally enjoying it and freaking out just as much as you will when you see these things. And that's really the magic what Geek Nation Tours has to offer. It's like when you go to that great gaming convention with all your fellow geeks and you're all freaking out over the new board game Hotness, where if you're at home saying that, people are like, what? Why are you so excited about a board game? So they don't get it. But Geek Nation Tours, they do get it. And so again, all these great exotic locales, but also the thing to remember about Geek Nation Tours is maybe you want to go to that big gaming convention and it's far from your home. You want to go, you really are going to go by yourself. You want to be people who you can hang out with, understand. Again, Geek Nation Tour is here to help you as well. For example, Adepticon 2017 got a great tour there. You're going to go there with a bunch of other Geek Nation Tour folks. Terrace is going to make sure that you're hooked up with all the best events. You'll get to see some exclusive things, like maybe having dinner with folks like us at the D6 Generation and other podcasters, other famous game designers. A great way to get to know people, get to meet people, and get just really feel at home at these places, and then do other great things in the area as well. So there's really no better way to travel as a geek. And if you're thinking about, getting out there and seeing the world, and you are yourself a geek, and you probably are if you listen to this show, head on over and check out geeknationtours.com.
You're listening to the Dice Tower Network at dicetowernetwork.com. More fun than Merchant of Venus. Wait, what?
Who writes these?
Hey, welcome back. And as we talked about earlier in the show, we have with us now two of the designers of Dark Souls. We have DC and Alex from Steamforged Games. Welcome to the show, guys.
Thank you very much for having us here.
And so first, we've now SteamCon is going full steam ahead. I missed a trick there. And so we've only got these guys for a little time, so we want to lock this down, and we're going to kind of zip through our usual origin story. So very quickly, guys, how do you find yourselves with Steamforged?
Well, I started, this is DC talking, I started with Steamforged by kind of a circuitous route. I've been doing freelance game design since back when I was a power and controls engineer in Cincinnati, and from there I eventually wound up doing it more and more often in a freelance capacity until I eventually came on at Privateer Press back in 2008. Was there for a bunch of years. Then I tried to do the independent thing for a while, was working for Privateer, for Ninja Division, for Steamforged, until eventually Steamforged made me the proverbial offer you can't refuse. Nice. And I've been here for a little less than a year now, but working as the development manager at Steamforged Games.
Are you involved in pretty much all the games that happen here?
I am indeed.
Nice.
Yes. Some of them a little bit more or less than others, but I was the lead developer on Shadow Games. Mm-hmm. I am pretty involved in Guildball, and along with Alex, we are the two development leads on Dark Souls as well. So I'm a busy guy.
Right. Cool.
And you were doing a lot of the chain yanking at the keynote, I think, last night. When Matt tried to go off script.
I don't think there's any man on the planet who can truly hold those chains. I think his Mrs. Andrea probably would do the best job, but she wasn't here to help us out.
Nice.
I'm pretty sure Matt doesn't have chains. It's not a thing that exists. If the chains were there to hold, maybe, but they don't exist.
No.
So, Alex, how did you come to be a Steamforged?
So I started off my involvement with the company with Guildball. I was involved in the Lawyers Guild, which is sort of the group that monitor the rules and provide rulings on rule discrepancies and stuff. Then I helped out on the Kickstarter. I got asked if I wanted to help out on the Kickstarter, just doing sort of the support side of things, talking to the people of the community, giving them all the information they needed. And then following that, I got asked if I wanted to come along for the design week for Dark Souls, just to have some input, and then ended up coming out of that with a job as a junior designer at Steamforged, and then that's gone full steam ahead to the point where I'm now majoritively working on Dark Souls. I think that's pretty safe to say, right?
Yeah.
Majoritively working on Dark Souls.
Now, had you done any game design work or rules design prior to helping out with
I've always had a big interest in sort of the rules of games and how everything comes together. I generally tend to pick them up very quickly. Like with the Lawyers Guild, when we were going through doing a lot of the Season 2 stuff, I had a lot of input with that. Not necessarily any direct thing with design, at least not. I wouldn't put it the way that I had experience with design in an official capacity, but I guess I've always had an interest for it.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think it says a lot about a company that can find talent like that and get you test you out, get you involved, and then say, yeah, this guy's great. Let's get him in and doing it. It's great.
Yeah, I think you find more game developers that have come through some sort of path rather than came to it directly out of their college experience. The way I look at it is if you have creative skills merged with your analytical skills, that's probably come up on your show before.
Sure.
But that's really kind of the key of being a good game designer, because you need to be able to think up all these awesome new ideas, be able to see the potential within some new character or some new game, but then you also need to be able to turn that into a reality on the tabletop. So,
yeah, those higher executive functions. And we've all seen those games designed by people who lacked those.
Right. Well, yeah, we've seen games that have missed one or the other.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
With things like Kickstarter and other crowdfunding platforms, it's easier to get your ideas out there. But when you're missing the creative, it feels a little dry.
Yeah.
And when you're missing the analytical, it feels unbalanced.
Right.
So we are very fortunate to have found Alex, and even though he doesn't come from a game design background, and in many ways, neither do I. We go back far enough.
Right.
But yeah, just he's been really able to come on board very quickly with figuring out new things that the different bosses can do and different items can do, and then also being able to do the analysis and make it a balanced game as well.
Yeah.
Let's talk about Dark Souls.
Yeah, this is all about Dark Souls.
So, I could talk forever about the Kickstarter process, but we've talked about that a lot before on the show. I'm really curious about what you guys thought about as the essence of Dark Souls. So when you started thinking about sort of the core mechanics of the game and what it absolutely had to capture, what did you guys think about? Well, we'll start with you, DC.
Well, I was brought on more for the board game side of things. If I'm being perfectly honest, I purchased off of Steam Dark Souls and started playing it right after I found out I was going up to the cabin for Design Week. And on the far end of the spectrum, we've got Alex.
Yeah, I played a lot of Dark Souls.
Oh, excellent.
More than I'd actually cared to admit, I think. And tried to hide the Steam stats because my girlfriend saw them. I don't think she'd be overly happy about them.
I think it makes up the lifetime of a small child.
Yeah. Or adult, grown adult. A lot of it was coming down to kind of what experience did we want to capture from Dark Souls. When you're playing Dark Souls, you have lots of different experience levels. You have those that play it an awful lot.
Sure.
You have those that try it, die within like 5 times in an hour, and go done with this.
Only 5.
Only 5. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was. I think we made the decision pretty early on. We wanted to go for that feel of a blind playthrough. The person that's never played the game before which means that the thing that you get when you're playing a blind playthrough is you're constantly gaining information. You didn't know anything before, and every movement you do, every enemy you encounter, you're learning new information. And if you remember that, that's how you're going to improve. If you not remember it, that's what causes you to die repeatedly and give up in an hour. That was the main hook that I think we wanted to get in, was this whole learning from mistakes aspect to it.
Right.
And then sort of going along that path. Another big thing with Dark Souls is it has to be fair. When you die in a Dark Souls video game, you'd never die because it was unfair to you. The game is programmed to be perfectly fair. It's hard to get that in a board game. You know, dice are involved. We're aware that dice are involved. We're aware that dice can happen. But we've done the best we possibly can to make sure that somewhere down the line when you die, irrelevant of whether a dice roll went bad or not, you've probably made a poor decision that's meant that bad dice roll can kill you.
Right.
At some point along the line, you went in more than you should have, and that action at some point has resulted in that bad dice roll killing you because you've allowed it to.
Well, you totally captured it. So it was really a lot of fun. We should tell our listeners we got a chance to play Dark Souls.
We did. Full playthrough.
On the first night, one of their premiere games, which was awesome. So it was kind of cool.
With almost the entire Steamforged team at one point or another around our table.
So, and we'll talk a little bit about the prototype, the near production quality games you guys came up with, because they look fantastic. And yet I know you guys are busily putting together the last little bits for the first day ever. But we should just say for our listeners that this is a pure co-op game.
Yeah.
Handles up to 4 players.
Yeah.
Yes.
And what you were mentioning, Alex, which I thought was interesting, was this idea that you want to always feel like you died fairly. And in a pure co-op game, a lot of times the AI, I'm using air quotes here, right?
Yeah.
But the algorithm, whatever the card decks or whatever the games use, either they're very easy to figure out and they're almost trivial, or they are super hard and you just died because of a bad card flip.
Yep.
And what we noticed this last night, every room we died in, it was always my bad. You know, some player just immediately know, oh, I did it. And even in our final boss fight.
Well, the final boss fight was exactly as you suggested, Alex, where I know exactly why I died, because I misused my reroll and didn't have it when I needed it.
Another thing that was really interesting, and it's interesting, both of you, you know, DC, you're a veteran game designer, but, you know, Dark Souls is new to you. And then, Alex, you're it was like the love letter to the Dark Souls fan base, right, from you. And what I think was great was last night, I dabbled in Dark Souls. I know enough to be dangerous. Craig doesn't play video games at all.
Okay.
Meanwhile, there's 2 other... And as the rules are being described, you know, Craig and I are just kind of going, ooh, cool, that'll be a neat mechanic. And other players are like, oh, yes, this is out of the video game. Like, they were immediately going, oh, that's exactly right. Oh, that's exactly right. So it feels like the discovery for a non-Dark Souls fan is still there. But for the Dark Souls fans, it
really puts it, in my mind, in that classic sweet spot of a game that's an homage to an existing IP, but at the same time has so many awesome elements to it that I, coming to it totally blind, loved. I didn't know that X came from the video game, or when this happened, this always didn't know any of that. But it all made sense to me, and it was intuitive. I enjoyed it immensely. And it was immersive for me as well, which I think is really hard to do. So congratulations, guys, on that.
Well, thank you very much. I think that one of the keys with any licensed property is finding the right balance between the abstraction side of things and the simulation side of things. Like, we've all played licensed games that went too abstract. Sure, they have cool artwork on them from some movie or TV show I love, but it feels like I'm just playing Rummy or something.
Yeah, right.
And then we've seen ones that are too simulationist, where the game is so complex because they're trying to take every tiny little element of the game. And so that was a real journey for us. Back at the cabin when we did the initial design week, Alex and I were probably the 2 farthest apart.
That's fair to say.
And we had some great discussions on it. And we wound up being the right people for the job to do the lead development work on the balancing all the components and moving it all forward, and took a really good journey together, I think, bringing the right level of abstraction and the right level of simulation.
Yeah, very much. It's sort of, when we were doing the design week at the cabin initially, before I realized it was necessarily a trial to potentially get a job, it was
fun until then.
Yeah, then it was like, okay, this is... I thought we were just playing games, guys. Come on.
It's an audition, a week-long audition, 24 hours a day.
It was very much one of those where I was coming at it from the huge fan of the video game, where I was very much doing what DC was talking about. where it's like, oh, cool, so we nailed that mechanic down. Onto this one.
Yeah.
Oh, we got that one. Onto the next. Onto the next. Onto the next. How long's that rulebook looking? 50 pages. How many more have we got? And then you suddenly have that click moment where you're like, okay, people still need to be able to play this that aren't sitting in this room.
Right.
Like the huge part of learning for me definitely came from the rules writing side of things,
Right.
where I could sit and explain mechanics of a game to anybody until they explain them, but I don't come in the box.
Right. We have jokingly said if we could include a tiny Alex in every box, it would be the perfect game.
But it's very much kind of that thing of you can talk through something very easily. That you have to put yourself in that place where you are the person that doesn't know how this game works, which when it's in your life for the past few months is very hard to do. Put yourself in that situation where you pretend you don't know anything. Does this make sense when I read this through? Does that explain everything without assuming anything? Is it clear enough?
Right.
But does it, like, you need to avoid rambling, and that's definitely a huge part that I've found working with DC is kind of where the rules started, where the rules ended up.
Yep.
There's like a huge gap in sort of things where DC sort of send me an email or have a talk to me on Skype. So what do we think to this going? Initially, I'm just like, what do you mean? How could you do that?
Well, I love to hear you guys say that. I think it's fantastic that you're thinking about how the rules are going to be written and how concise you can describe this mechanic as you design them. I think a lot of companies could do a better job of that. There's something that Craig and I talk about on the show that we've heard from other folks who do creative works, whether they're writers or game designers, and it's this concept of kill your babies. So as you work on something, you realize at some point that this awesome idea you had is really awesome, but the game's actually better without it. Can you each give us an example of one of the babies you had to kill?
Well, and
darlings is generally the
I like killing babies.
Killing your darlings.
You know, dead baby jokes in the 80s. They're still
well, there
fun.
goes PG-13. But all right.
Well, and what Alex says, he says, don't get precious
about
something. It applies to the other games we work on as well. People can sometimes get so attached to one particular idea. I'm gonna take it from the opposite direction. And at one point, I was saying that maybe we could pull out from the core game experience the part where you drop souls when you die.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times, as you guys might have noticed when you were playing through, it doesn't always come into play much. A lot of times you've already spent those souls. And that's something that is core to the video game. So Alex was hesitant, and then we did some playthroughs with it being moved to the campaign system rather than it being part of the core game. And it did seem to lose a little something, because sometimes you do keep some souls around, and it provides attention and even kind of directs some of the discussion around the table. Because one of the other things we really want is for people to get involved with each other, for there to be a lot of communication. A lot of co-op games can get to the point where it's pretty clear what each person wants to do, and you just kind of march forward.
Right.
And we wanted to still have a lot of those elements where there is discussion at the table, and people are like, should we really save these souls? Yeah, we could level Bob up to tier 4 later, or tier 3 later with 4 souls. All right, I'm doing terrible. Level up
nailing it.
Tier
Nailing
2 to
it.
3 with 8 souls. Should we save these souls to try to get to 8? I know what I'm trying to say. But do we risk dropping them in the next room? And so we wound up bringing that back. And I think that was absolutely the right choice. And so in this case, it wasn't something to add, but something to take away that turned out being not the right decision.
Well, that one definitely resonates. When we were playing Friday, and for listeners who aren't familiar with this mechanic, one of the things about Dark Souls that I really enjoyed was this idea that after you clear a room, so the basics of the game is you're a party of adventurers moving from room to room, a group of monsters in a particular room.
Mm-hmm.
After you clear that room, you go back to your base. And at your base, you get some number of souls for your little minor victory in the room there.
2 per player.
That you can immediately spend on items you find in a deck of cards. So you can spend them to flip over new cards, and then there's some cost.
Or buying back your luck, which, if you could manage it.
Which is fantastic because so many of these games, these adventure games, give a nod to leveling up. And that's one of the most fun parts about a role-playing game, right? Is that leveling up feeling. And video games obviously have that too. And yet it seems like it's almost just a nodded to in some of these other games. But because it occurs so often in Dark Souls, you really get interested in it. And it does become a tough decision about, well, should we spend all of our souls or save some? And we had that moment in the game where we'd already died or we'd already gone through and gone back to the camp. We had to re-clear a room. We decided we'd save 2 souls because last time we cleared that room, it was no problem. And we know they might drop, but no worries. We went in there, and sure enough, we died in the room.
Yeah, the exact situation.
Dropped
that
our
you were
souls,
talking
and now
about.
we had to go back, fight back for our souls. So it was a perfect. So it's not too cluttery of a mechanic, but it's enough there to really make you make some.
And as you said, it doesn't come up often. It only came up once, but when it came up, it was driving our decisions, and it was very. It added tension to. Well, we don't really want to go through that room again, but we've got to go through that room again. We need to get those souls.
What about you, Alex? What was one of the darlings you were sad to see go?
Which one? To be honest, there weren't all of the ones that we either made the decision to simplify or lose. I think I'm very happy to say it was the right call. I don't think there's any that particularly bothered me. DC's was a really good example of one that nearly went, but came back. I mean, the game just
talk a little bit about spells versus shields versus one-handed weapons.
Oh, so
a little bit.
So essentially, in Dark Souls, spells are they go into 3 different categories. You have pyromancies, sorceries, and then you have miracles.
Right.
And in the video game, you need some sort of catalyst to use them. And that's initially where we wanted to go. We were looking at some sort of system where you had to get a catalyst, and then you could, the upgrade slots for a catalyst would be spells. And then it sort of gradually got simpler and simpler, where we just came down to maybe everything that you just need one hand to use is categorized as a one-handed weapon or a one-handed piece of equipment. And that was definitely one where I was like, we're simplifying a lot there, but it just makes it work so much better, I think.
Yeah, and I think we've seen it in the playthroughs where people just intrinsically understand, here's this hand on my character board, I put something in it.
Yeah.
And it's not a complex system, but it still is a system with depth. Character will play so differently if they're holding a fireball spell and a sword versus if they're holding a great bow or a shield and an axe. It gives a lot of versatility without a lot of granularity.
Yeah, I love it. One thing immediately attracted me to that is the whole layout on the player mat. So the player mat's in front of you. Great art on it, by the way. And so on one side, it looks like, and I think I was telling Alex this the other night, that player mat looks like that pause screen you get in an RPG on a computer, where you hit that button to go manage your inventory, and there's your stats on one side, your the classic Dungeons and Dragons stats there with that level up. When you guys use little cubes to show how your dexterity versus your strength are going, and then the other side is sort of that iconography of the mannequin, right? And then there's your different inventory slots. And then you put cards right into those slots, and it's very much that feeling of I'm in a video game and I'm managing my inventory. It's really nails it. And we really made some tough decisions about halfway through the game as you really started getting some interesting inventory. And we ran into those things where what you were carrying totally changed who you felt like you were playing. We had our assassin turned into a mage about halfway through the game.
I love the fact that at the very beginning, when you understand there's 4 different stats you're looking at, and the only thing they really do in the game is dictate what equipment you can have. So none of us had any dexterity. We weren't buying dexterity. We weren't buying strength. We were like, oh, we'll be fine. Till the end, when we started getting these amazing cards we couldn't use because we hadn't upgraded in time. But the thing about the hands and the using, instead of having to worry about all the catalysts and everything else, you just got that one card, but you need a hand for it. That took me a minute to figure out. And then, actually, I think it was Alex at one point when the lightning spell that you've got there, like sort of floating in the breeze over your head, could go into your other hand if you want to drop your shield. And wait, it like all opened up for me. I was like, oh, let's just cast this whole assassin thing aside, and I've got lightning in one hand and fire in the other. And then, of course, I used my reroll and died. But it was great right up until that moment.
Those eureka moments are so important in gaming because you have such an emotional connection to this thing that just happened. And we try and have a lot of that in there. People really starting to fully understand the equipment system, even something as simple as how to set models up when you enter the room. Like once you've been hit by a node attack once or twice, you start thinking about entering the room a bit differently. Wait, guys. Let's split up. Let's get the aggro token over here. Let's do this.
Right. I think the thing that makes me so happy about that one is the fact that even as someone that designed the game, there's still a few eureka moments I had. Like when we were playtesting not too long ago, I had the realization that obviously we've got the rule that you can move and attack. You can attack and move. You can't move, attack, move. Unless you're the warrior. because
Right.
he has a heroic ability
Right.
that enables him, and his has a move baked into it.
Yep.
That doesn't count as your move, so he
Right.
can go in, hit someone, and if you've got 2 weapons, he could then heroic to go and
Yep.
hit someone else, and it was sort of like, huh.
We
Okay,
did
that's
that
You
pretty
last.
hadn't
cool.
done that in playtest?
We did that
Yeah.
last night. It was,
Oh, wow.
it was,
I've seen that one.
Yep.
No, I'd literally spotted it a few weeks ago. I was like, wait a
Oh,
minute,
yeah,
that's
yeah, a
not
few
an
weeks
actual move. That's a...
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was awesome because it came the other night when the warrior had a shield, which did a combat attack,
Yeah,
and then he had a
bash, yeah,
spear
yeah.
in his other hand, so he'd attack from a distance, and then he did his charge
Yeah.
trick. And
Yeah.
you can do some really amazing combos. And that was I think sort of another thing that I think captures the essence of almost a video game more than a tabletop RPG, which is the idea that in video games nowadays you can almost craft your character to what you want it to be, right?
Yeah.
And what you use kind of dictates what you become.
Yeah.
And I think this sort of your game does that in a board game way because as the ninja started leveling up her intelligence, assassin,
Yeah.
she became more of a ninja mage and less of an
Yep.
assassin, backstabby assassin.
Yep.
And I happen to do a lot of faith in my warrior, and all of a sudden he's a paladin, casting heal spells and wearing the glowy armor, and so it was really kind of cool to see your character evolve, and you definitely have that feeling of ownership at the end of the game, like, ooh, I made this warrior into something unique that won't be the same next time I play.
Yeah, that was one of the really important elements of balance between board game styling and video game styling, especially in the Dark Souls world. We wanted each character to be unique, but we also knew we wanted each character to be customizable, craftable, just like they are in Dark Souls. So you've got the elements that you were just talking about on the more video gamey side, and then on the more board gamey side, we added things like the heroic abilities. Those aren't part of the Dark Souls series. Those are something we added to lend some extra character and style to each unique class so that they feel a bit more distinct, which appeals more to that board game crowd, as well as the class treasures that get shuffled into the deck. If you're playing with a different class mix, you're going to have a different treasures that you find, which gives it some more distinction and variety and replayability. I do also want to mention real quick that one of the aspects of the game that I'm happiest with is how well it works with one player. There's a growing group of people playing one-player games. There's even awards now for best designed single player game of the year and stuff. And most of the time with a dungeon crawl, they'll just say, oh yeah, you can play with one player, just take 2 or 3 characters.
Right.
And it's not really a single player game of the same type anymore. You're playing just as if you were 2 or 3 people. And we are very happy with how it works from 1 player all the way up through 4. At 1 player, you're activating constantly, or even with 2, you're activating very frequently. But then with 4, you have this bigger pool of endurance that you're dealing with, where your health and stamina bars on each of the 4 characters. So it's almost more replayability simply by changing the number of characters, as well as changing which mini boss you fight, which main boss you fight, which character classes you choose to use. So there's a lot of ways to continue playing and enjoying Dark Souls for many, many, many hours. Almost as many as hours as Alex put into Dark Souls itself.
Well, that was almost, by the way.
Not exactly. Well, I think that solo play is really important too when you're trying to capture a video game feeling, right? I mean, Dark Souls is one of those games where you can solo it. It's the primary play mode, really, for a lot of players. And so to have that, I think, is really important. And we see that a lot on our show. Whenever we review a co-op game, almost the first question we know we're going to get on Facebook or Twitter is, can you play it solo? And so I think it's fantastic to have a strong solo experience there.
Yeah. I think the thing that came out with the single player sort of solo play mode more than anything is how different it makes the game feel. As DC said just then, it's kind of when you have the 4 players, you have a larger total of resources to use, but you can't react as immediately. And in the single player mode, obviously you're reacting non-stop, but you still only have the same amount of resources as one person would have. You don't get an increase. We don't sort of artificially increase anything outside of what you'd normally have. It's the normal character. You have the same 1 of everything that you have normally. You just get a bit of a boost when you're starting off to get you running because, again, the amount of treasure you get doesn't boost either.
Right.
But it becomes such a different game. It's such more of a sort of a resource management, reading what you need to do and really having to assess, like, do I go now? Do I You know, do I just hold back because I have complete control over everything here? So they are only ever going to come to me,
right?
So I have the complete control over that.
It's fantastic, and I think just for our listeners, so they know the scaling mechanic for the game is very simple. After each player goes, the monsters go. So if it's one player, it's player, monster, player, monster. If it's 4 players, it's player 1 monsters, player 2 monsters, player 3 monsters. And the challenge there is player 1 doesn't get to do anything again until all the other 3 players have gone, which means the monsters have gone 3 more times. So if you're in the wrong spot getting targeted, you're in a bad day.
Right.
One thing I wanted to quickly, before we run out of time, talk a little bit about is how the artificial intelligence for the monsters work. I think you guys did some really cool things here. So for the smaller rooms, the non-bosses, right, each monster type has a card, and that card has some very simple but effective basic AI. Like there's a little iconography that looks kind of like a D-pad, and that's direction and how far they move. And then there's an iconography that indicates the type of attack it's going to do and the amount of damage it's going to do. What's neat is the monsters don't roll any dice. They're going to automatically, what's going to happen for them is completely known to the player, right?
Yeah, that was one of the early decisions we made is the players roll the dice.
Yeah.
So when a monster attacks, a player rolls dice to block, resist, or dodge that attack. When the player attacks, they roll dice against a static number of the enemy's block or resist value. So that way you certainly have that feel of the control being in the hands of the player, or at least in the dice.
Yeah. And it's great, and you definitely feel that because whenever you enter a room, you know how the monsters are going to move. Immediately the party starts discussing the possible tactics we can use to minimize our damage and kill them as fast as possible. But I really want to kind of dive into the boss mechanics because that's really fascinating. So, and as we watch this happen, you really get the feeling that the boss attacks in a pattern, which is very video gamey.
Yep.
And then if you can keep yourself,
pattern that makes sense.
But it's a pattern that makes sense, much like video games. And if you can determine the pattern, understand the pattern, and hope the pattern change on you, which sometimes it does in video games and it does in Dark Souls, you'll be okay. But one wrong step and you get too close to the guy and you go like that. Can you talk a little bit about how the boss AI system came to be?
So the boss AI system started off with Matt and Rich. That was very much sort of their seed of the idea of one thing we want this AI deck to do is be able to sort of replicate that feeling of a boss fight. And the cards need to kind of work together. You know, it shouldn't matter what order these cards are in. It shouldn't matter how many of them are. It doesn't matter what's on them. As long as it works, that's the thing that matters. We're very fortunate that we obviously have the video games for inspiration as to how these look. So it's kind of ultimately a lot of the cards, it's kind of a movement with an attack. But and they function perfectly fine for those that aren't familiar with the video game.
Right.
And they will kill you just fine.
Yep.
But for those that play the video game, you've then got the in-theme names, and you've got the fact that these sort of, someone that hasn't played the video game, like move forward, do some damage. They're like, oh, that's attack from the game.
Yeah.
I remember that. We died to that all the time. And trying to get that feel was super important. And then trying to make it so that it didn't get stale. And then once PC were able to go into all of the other bosses, start playing around with this thing that seems so simple, this heat-up mechanic, where it's just like, oh, you hit a certain amount of health, you add another card in, and everything mixes up a bit. Being able to play around with that, so it's not just sort of your typical berserk health, where it's just like, oh, it gets harder now. Yeah. Being able to go in, play around with it, a lot of it was playing around with the whole memory mechanic side of it. Like, for example, there's some bosses where it's not just add one, it's add two, take one out of the first one. So you might have been particularly scared of a card that was going through the deck before they heated up. And you might be worrying about that coming up. It's literally not in the deck anymore because you took it out when it heated up. And just playing around with that thing so that you keep every fight feeling fresh. And then the addition, I think the icing on the cake, definitely the special rules for each boss.
Yeah, each boss has a single special rule that gives them an extra element to provide some character. Sometimes that ties into the heat up, or it ties into just kind of a static ability they have. One of the ones that I like a lot is the Gargoyle. It's a fairly simple ability, but it also is very fitting and makes sense in the game, where after he heats up, the heat up cards are all basically like flying attacks that get added in. And the ability is once he's heated up, if you're in his node, it costs you an extra stamina to try and reach up and attack him.
I thought the boss mechanics were really amazing because each of these cards not only shows the boss is the only as far as I've noticed, the only monster in the game that has facing
Yes.
that
Yep.
matters. And he's got these quadrants, right? So his front, his
Mm-hmm.
two sides, and his back. And what I think is fascinating about these cards is not only does it show which way the boss is going to move and the arc he's going to attack in, and generally the one we were fighting, he attacked pretty much everybody in that arc.
Yep.
But also it exposes a weak spot on the boss for a particular
Right.
arc, which is classic video game. So it's like the boss is going to move to the right and attack over there. So if I'm on his left, that's his weak side. So I want to get over there for extra damage. And you find yourselves trying to fight in these patterns that are exactly video game. But to your point, Alex, you don't know what the next card's going to be, so you don't really know, is he going to go two right and swing? Is he going to go two left and swing? Is he going to jump up and down or whatever they do? And Alex, when I was talking to you, the thing I thought that was the most interesting was your passion around, I don't know the Dark Souls universe as well as you do, so you were rattling off all the major bosses from the game, and you're like, oh, wait till you fight her, because she fights exactly like she does in the game, and you got to do this. And this guy's just like the game. You got to nick at him. If you stand in front of him too long, you're dead. And so the passion and the desire to make the bosses not only unique and different, but match the spirit of what they were like in the video game was definitely evident.
Yeah. I mean, it's very much a thing of, obviously, board game. We want this to be available to those that want to play board games. But we still need to have, it's a Dark Souls game. We want the Dark Souls to be in there for people that are aware it's there, if that makes any sense. So we want it to be fun for those that don't, but we want it to be recognizable. It's sort of like that if you know club, if you know what I mean.
Sure.
And I think we've really managed to nail that on the head with, well, definitely the bosses, and I'd say the grunts as well, like the feel of the Silver Knight Great Bowman, where you look at the model and go, that's a big arrow, and then you look at his card and realize it hits everyone you know. And you're like, yeah, that kind of makes sense, because that thing's bigger than he is.
Yep.
Awesome.
Well, and even though the toolbox is small, it's how we use it in different ways that I think promotes a lot of the fun. Things like the leap ability in particular, allows a monster to, rather than moving just one node towards you, it just leaps onto the node directly, often of the aggro. So it's like, okay, I'm going to come over here, I'm going to be safe. But just like some of those moves from the video game where they come flying into the air, crashing down with a spear through the head, we've been able to simulate some of that in the board game as well. So,
Nice. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate it. I know you got to get back to all the fun activities here at SteamCon, but I think Dark Souls had an amazing showing here. I think the Twitch live stream was well attended. Everybody, there were lines forming to try the game out. It looks fantastic. The models look great, so I think all that hard work you guys did the last minute getting everything ready definitely paid off. And the game is due to come out sometime middle of next year. Is that when it's going to hit streets?
So we're starting shipping out for the Kickstarter backers in March.
Okay.
And then it will be out, I believe, once they're all fulfilled. I don't think we've got a set date for it being out in retail yet. We want to make sure that we do the Kickstarter backers right and get them everything that they've sort of helped the project along with first, and then get to the ground, I'd assume, around April time for the retail release.
Great, exciting.
Fantastic.
Well, thank you, gentlemen.
Very much. If people are more interested in getting to know you or knowing what you're into, is there any way that folks can look for you online or any information about what you're working on?
Well, on the Steamforged Games site, there is a blog section that we've been doing a lot more of lately. So there's a lot of new blogs coming out about various things that we're doing in the world of Guildball. The Kickstarter updates for Dark Souls have also been giving a lot of information. We didn't even talk about traps today, but there's an article we did about traps, an article we did about how the exploration system we have talked about really works. Just lots of different aspects of the games that you can check out there on the Kickstarter by looking at the updates. Even if you're not a backer, you're welcome to just go to the Dark Souls Kickstarter and look up all those updates, see the fun Dark Souls stuff we're cooking up. And then we also can be reached in other ways as well. We're on various Facebook groups and on the forums and in the comments. Alex practically lives in the Dark Souls comments some days.
Yeah, I think it's an addiction at this point. Yeah.
Nice. Well, thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you very much, guys.
Thank you, guys.
The way, Craig, so unfortunately, DC and Alex had to leave us because
they're live streaming the World Championships for Guildball.
That sounds important.
And they have a little thing. Steamforged has been live streaming all weekend long.
Yeah,
they live streamed, and this is still available now, right?
It's on Twitch.
Yep. So they live streamed. Actually, if you're interested in what you're hearing here, they live streamed their entire first playthrough of Dark Souls, which was not prepped. The deck of cards weren't prepped in any way. It was Matt and Rich and DC and another gentleman,
and then
name
Alex.
I forgot, and Alex
Alex refereed it
a little bit,
And-
which you don't need a referee, but of course we just heard. It's
But that's a
always
great
helpful to have
thing to
Alex.
watch because that was really literally all of their first playthroughs
Yep.
with near production quality bits.
Yep.
And as Alex was mentioning to us off the air before we started, he was spending the whole earlier part of the week cutting out tokens.
He and his
getting everything
girlfriend
ready.
were up till 4:30 in the morning twice.
When I got here, first thing on Friday, I went to the painting area, and there they were airbrushing all the 3D sculpts of the models, getting them all ready. So they were really working hard to make sure that was all ready to go.
Yeah, that's
And-
actually a hilarious because all of the models being used this weekend are 3D sculpts, which
Mm-hmm.
of course cost a lot. And they've been they've been airbrushed to make them look plastic.
Right.
They were airbrushed in the colors of the plastics that were
They're going
originally
to
come in.
So they look very close to the final plastic, but of course the other problem with 3D printed models is they're very fragile, so you
Yep.
be careful. But they were kind enough to create 2 of these prototype sets.
Yeah.
They and they look, as you can see in the video from Twitch. If you look carefully, you can see the tokens are handcrafted. But if you
I don't think
glance
you can
at
even
it,
tell from
it looks
you can
like a nice.
barely tell holding
It looks like production quality, and
it's about a 2-hour video.
yeah, and what was great too was not only did they show this video for the first time, but then right after that they set up 2 copies of the game, and they let anybody who wanted to sign up come and play, and they were kind enough to save a couple slots for Craig and I.
They did, yeah.
And we got a chance to play Dark Souls, and it wasn't just like some short demo.
No.
It was a full
game,
almost 3-hour, 2.5-hour experience. Playing it with a whole playing scenario, and with 4 players, Craig and I, and two other
Andrew,
SteamCon
a
players,
listener, and then
a listener,
and then a fourth.
and it was great, and we had a lot of fun. And we wanted to kind of take a moment here, because we didn't have a little longer with Alex and DC, and kind of jump into some of the other mechanics that impressed us. That we didn't get a chance to talk with them about. And one of the things I think we should mention off the bat is we didn't talk about the types of classes.
Right.
Do you remember the class types?
Yep, I do. You had a herald who had a spear, and he was kind of like he had a decent damage dealing ability, but he was more of a buffer kind of guy. He helped other people with his ability. And remember that all of these things are this is where you start, and then you can completely change where you go based on the stats that you upgrade and the equipment that you get. So there was the herald. Then I was the assassin. She's really good at dealing damage, especially when she dodges. Really good dodge. Not a lot of armor, which exactly as you'd expect. Then there, Russ, you were the warrior.
Yes.
Big damage dealer, not
barbarian
a big tank.
like.
Yep. And then there was the knight.
Who was more of a tank.
Very, very armored, but not quite as much of a damage dealer. And then 1 or 2 pieces of equipment, and all of a sudden somebody else is a tank or somebody else is doing damage.
It can change a lot, but what's interesting is that there's these little cube tracks for your stats, as you mentioned earlier. And while everybody can level up any of the cube stats they want by spending souls between rounds of combat, different characters do have higher jumps and stronger tracks for their intelligence versus their strength versus their dexterity. So there is a predisposed sort of, you kind of want the ninja to be or the assassin to be more the dexterity person.
Really good dexterity.
Because it's more
and jumps
affordable for her to
faster.
jump faster in dex. So there is some of that, but again, you can craft it based on the needs and the moment of the game.
Because of the cards we were flipping out and just what was happening in the moment, I was leveling up my intelligence, which is not generally something that was that the assassin was predisposed towards. But putting the soul tokens into that, I then had the intelligence to, when these magic spells started coming out, that just happened to be what the sort of role that I fell into, because I was trying to get the intelligence to use other assassin stuff, and it just happened to coincide. So it was really, really cool.
So while we're on the player boards, I wanted to talk about one other element of the player board we skipped, which is a really cool mechanic.
I thought this was
so on the left side of the player board, you have sort of the mannequin where all your cards go for your inventory, and on the right side, there's this area where you track all your stats. And those, again, they're tracked by one
and
cube.
Beautiful artwork from the game.
A beautiful artwork. There's a cube for each stat, and there's little cutout squares in the board, so your cubes can kind of not be knocked over. But at the very bottom, there's this track of cubes, and from the left, it's black, and it slowly changes to red, and on the far right, it's red. And then you've got these 2 sets of cubes, these black cubes and these red cubes. And how it works is, as you take damage in the game, you're going to put red cubes in from the right, and as you do things that require fatigue, which is your primary sort of resource in the game, you put in black cubes from the left. So if Craig is the ninja, just chooses to cast a lot of spells when she eventually became, I keep calling her ninja, the assassin, wizard, ninja.
Yep.
Because at the end of the game, Craig was a ninja wizard.
It was crazy.
But casting those spells took a lot of fatigue, and certain moves for your weapons take a lot of fatigue.
Well, it's really interesting because most of your weapons and the spells, you have different levels of attack.
Mm-hmm.
So, for instance, I could do a low-level fireball that didn't cost me any fatigue, but didn't have area effect, didn't do as much damage. Or you could jack it all the way up where it's taking half my fatigue to cast one spell, but it's doing 2 of these yellow explosive dice, and it was great. But you've got to use this.
So it's very tricky because you're tempted to spend lots of fatigue, but spending lots of fatigue has 2 problems. First of all, you only get back 2 fatigue per round.
Right.
But more importantly, because you're filling up the same track, in other words, fatigue fills in this row of boxes from the left and damage fills from the right. If that entire row on the bottom is ever filled, you're dead.
Right.
So the more fatigue you use, the less room you have to take damage.
And there's only 10 spots.
Right. And the more damage you take, the less room you have for fatigue. So if you decide to really stress yourself out, a light hit from an enemy could kill you. And as soon as one player dies, game over. There's no player elimination. So you have to be very, very careful. Now, if you manage to clear the room, you get to take that entire board clears off. You rest. So you heal and all your fatigue goes away. But healing damage is really hard. There's only a couple of cards in the deck that actually help you out with it. Nobody can start at the beginning of the game and help out with it.
Although there is a once per life, so to speak, ability where your entire thing clears.
Yeah, you basically have this one-use potion you can flip over and clears that row too. But you really got to think carefully about this, and it's a really interesting mechanic to get you really thinking through, well, I'm going to push and it's very strong push your luck sort of constantly happening in this game.
Across the board.
All the time. And one of them is, well, it's like, well, Craig, I can really max out my stamina here and really do a lot, but there's going to be this one monster left. I can kill all of them but one. I'll be okay. According to his mechanics, he'll attack you next, so I'll be fine. But you got to kill him your turn because then he's going to attack me. And I'm only going to have like 1 wound left based on stamina. And so Craig's like, I got this. And then
not.
And then something happens. So I love that mechanic in particular, the trading fatigue for damage and damage for fatigue. Brilliant, and I haven't seen anything like that before. We should also talk a little bit about how movement and the board layout looks.
Yeah, it doesn't look at all like a Descent board.
No.
It actually looks like a Dungeon Explorer.
More of a Super Dungeon Explorer.
Super Dungeon Explorer
multiple tiles, and each tile is a room.
Yep.
Right? And there's doors on each side to kind of indicate which way you can enter
cool
the tile.
artwork, but the artwork isn't really indicative of what you're looking at.
Yeah. And then each of these tiles is covered with these little colored circles.
Yep.
And those are the places you can stand. And there's a figure count limit on each circle. It's 3, right?
Yeah.
And some of the circles
are called nodes. Those circles.
And some of the nodes have iconography on them.
Yes.
So when you and by the way, when you set the game up, you're going to put 1 card in each of these rooms, which is going to indicate the type of monsters that are waiting for you. Kind of a little bit like level 7, a little bit there. And based on how far away from you or the scenario, the closer cards generally are lower level monsters than the farther away cards, and of course it's the final boss room someplace.
So the closer you get to the final boss, the harder the rooms are.
So it's a dynamic board because these tiles can be put together in a wide variety of ways, not just in a nice clear rectangle.
And although the artwork is cool and doesn't really affect gameplay, the node positioning and the different icons on the nodes do make each room different.
And what's cool about this is when you turn your card over, typically there's an icon symbol for nodes on the board with symbols of the kinds of monsters that show up there.
Yeah, there's
so
there's 2 different spawning nodes.
Yes.
So it's going to tell you which monsters are going to be on which one of those.
So maybe there's 2 warrior skeletons and a crossbowman on one spot.
And then a giant bowman on another
and then a big
spot.
other guy on the other. But then there's these other icons, as you're about to say, Craig, that your card might also say, and there's terrain here and here.
Right.
Like a box, a barrel, some crates. And then here there's traps.
Gravestone.
Right. And over here there's traps in these spots. And now
the cool thing about the traps is they take up every spot except for your entrance spots and a spot that's taken up by something else. So all of a sudden, the entire board is the entire room is flooded with traps.
Right.
And the traps are double-sided tokens. When you go onto a node with a trap, you flip that token over, and it's either going to be an attack that you have to deal with,
or nothing,
either dodge or try to resist, or it's going to be nothing. So you don't know exactly, but it's just this threatening. All of a sudden, the entire room is flooded with these red tokens, and you're like, "Oh my god!" And you feel confined. You feel like you're really restrained by these threats that are all over the place.
Yeah. And you just hinted at another super cool mechanic we didn't talk about, which is this idea of when you are attacked, you actually have 2 choices as a hero, right? Which is really interesting. So on the bottom of your different pieces of equipment you're carrying. So remember that mannequin with these equipment. There are sort of a little row of icons on each item. And even if it's a sword or an axe or a spear, it has both the damage it deals, but also the protection it offers. Right. So a sword might be good for parrying. Or you also might be carrying a shield, and you're wearing some kind of armor. And this iconography indicates how much dice of defense it gives against a melee attack, or how much dice of defense, physical attack, how much dice of damage it gives against a magic or ranged attack. It's magic, but the ranged attacks are all magic.
No, the big giant bow is physical attack. Okay, so it's, for some reason, the crossbow guys are firing magic bolts.
Okay.
The big, giant, enormous archer guy is firing just a big, giant missile.
So basically, it's physical damage resistance, magic damage resistance, and then there's a dodge option. Excuse me. And then there's an option for upgrade.
Right.
So what's interesting is you can add, if someone attacks you, you have two choices. You can try to block the damage, in which case you add up all the damage resistance to that type. So if it's a magic attack, you add up your magic. If it's physical, you add up your physical. You roll that many dice, and the number of successes you get reduces the attack by that amount. And as we mentioned earlier, the monsters have a fixed attack. So like the skeletal archer says it's going to do 4 damage to you. So you roll all your dice, and you're hoping you're going to get 4 successes, which would block all that damage. Right. And if you block some of it, you just take that much damage, whatever the difference is. Yeah. But the other option is you can try to dodge.
Right.
The dodge dice are different dice. They're these green dice. And you can add up all your dodge numbers. Now, here's the thing. Heavier armor and heavier items offer no dodge capability.
Right.
So most of your dodge stuff is 0.
Yep.
So unless you're wearing light, nimble armor, you can't dodge at all.
Right. And the cool thing about the assassin, his armor, or her armor, gives her a dodge, and her shield gives her no ability to block damage, but gives her another dodge. So right out of the box, when you're playing the assassin, you have 2 dodge dice, and those dodge dice are basically a 4+ save. You're rolling 2 dice, which mathematically, I don't know, somebody tell me, but I shouldn't have died to that stupid boss monster.
What's awesome is if you dodge, you take no damage whatsoever.
Right.
So it's a guaranteed miss. But if you fail to dodge, you take all the damage. So it's a tricky move. But that's another great way you can do your character. So in the first half of the game, the knight, the tank, he can't dodge at all.
Yeah.
But my guy, the warrior, can dodge and block.
Yeah.
And so I was choosing back and forth. But by about halfway through the game, I decided I really want to be a tank that paladin. So I switched my armor off, and I could no longer dodge. And I was just walking around just soaking hits. So that mechanic also is brilliant. And you really start finding yourself trying to decide, are you going to be light armor? It's a great way to make light armor feel light and heavy armor feel heavy. That you don't often see in board games with sort of encumbrance, which is sort of a...
There's a lot of that where there's these really cool higher level concepts sort of baked into the game where you don't need to worry about encumbrance. You don't need to worry about dexterity in gameplay. And it's all actually, you can see if you just take a step back, it's all there. It's being done for you by the game.
Yeah. So one of the area we wanted to cover is these sort of single-use things.
Yeah.
And this will lead us into what happens when you die, too. So you have these several tokens on your board that are flip-overable.
Right.
On your player mat.
Yeah. So the healing one that we already
talked about the one where you flip it and you can clear your row.
They all have cool names from Dark Souls, and we can't remember any of them.
The other one is all the characters have a sort of a one-use sort of superpower.
Yep.
And when you use that, you got to flip it over. So the warriors was that he gets a free move and attack.
Yep.
Which is unusual. Most of the time you got to move or attack, and this is a neat trick.
Yeah. The assassins was awesome. If you successfully dodge, you can attack whoever attacked you, causing you to dodge, as long as you have range to them. I never used it once.
Right.
Yeah.
And then the last one is what they call luck, which gives you a single die reroll.
Yep.
So that one, you flip it over and you can reroll one of your dice.
Right.
It's tempting to use that when you're attacking, but it's also really smart to use it for defending or dodging. Very handy as well.
And Alex was telling us, because that's how we died, and it turns out that's how they died
all the time.
All the time. And so they call it a pride reroll.
Right, because you're like, I want to be awesome, so you reroll it. And
I should have done more damage. I'm going to take my reroll. Right. And then you don't have the reroll when you need it to save yourself.
So when you clear a room, you go back to the campfire, which is sort of the starting room. That room remains cleared, and now you can level up in things, but also you are going to, some of these things automatically reset. And some of them you have to pay. So we pay souls for luck.
You pay 1 soul to replace your luck. I think everything else only resets when you die.
Okay. So that leads us to what happens when you die.
Right.
So we've talked about clearing rooms. And what's interesting, when you clear a room, you go back to the camp. The card that was in the room that told you it was there stays face up, saying the room's cleared. And then when you decide to leave the camp again, you just fast forward to the next room you haven't been in. So you don't have to walk through the old room.
Yep.
When you die, a couple things happen.
When any person dies.
When any single player dies, the whole party has failed.
Yep.
And you go back to the starting tile. You remove one of your spark tokens. So generally in the scenario we were playing, and I think it was variable spark.
Yeah, I think so. Yep.
We had 3 sparks, which means basically
2 sparks, which meant 3 tries.
3 tries.
Yeah.
So you remove your now died one, so go back to the first thing. But here's the other thing: all the rooms with those face-up cards go back to face down.
Right. And this is where Alex was saying that it rewards the learning. You have to learn what's going on, because you have to now battle your way through all those rooms again, just like in a video game. But it's probably going to be easier. You've leveled up maybe once or twice. You've got better equipment. You've got better skills. And if you remember, because the cards all flip back over again, face down. So you have to remember what you're looking at, because until you go into that room, you're not allowed to look at the card again.
And you'll say things like, "Oh, this was the archer room.
Yeah.
This was the trap room.
Right.
This was the big giant scary dude room." And what's interesting about it is also when you die, all those one-use tokens we talked about flip back over. So that all comes back. And while it may sound like, "Oh no, I got to go through the whole this whole thing again, it's going to be boring," it's not, because remember, when you clear a room, you get to level up again. You get 2 more souls per player, which allows you to buy more cool equipment. So it gives you that feeling of farming with a video game, where you go back out and level up again and level up again, so you're the high enough level you want to be at when you do the boss fight. And you can decide, sometimes there's rooms that are optional, and you just skip that room, or you're going to go back there and get that extra stuff. So I really like this spark idea. It gives you that very video game feeling of respawning. It gives you the video game feeling of remembering the rooms and learning from them.
Yeah.
But it also gives that room that sense of pride of how far can you make it before you got to use one of your lives.
And it resets all those things too.
Right,
so
exactly.
you get basically you're restarting again, and you get a chance to now. I want to now you really want to go back to that room that killed you. So it increases your buy-in, almost your emotional stake in what's going on. Which
And then
I
you
thought
find
was
that
great.
cool item, and it's like, oh, I want to see what it does to those guys that were a little tough for us earlier.
When you're going through those earlier rooms, and the ones you've leveled up, you're just like, get out of my way, punk.
Right, it's actually pretty fun. So so that's pretty much it. That we just wanted to add a few bits of color to some of the mechanics we really found fascinating. I don't know, Craig. We can't review it. We don't own a copy yet. We haven't seen the final production copy.
Well, we talked a lot about the boss monster deck. But really, really quickly, to give you an idea, each monster has each boss has a deck of like 5 or 6 cards.
I don't even know how big they are.
And you're gonna
big,
gonna choose a random number of those cards, so that's gonna be different every time. And then they get shuffled up, and I believe it's 4 cards. And those cards are going to get flipped one at a time while you're fighting the boss monster, and they're going to indicate what kind of attacks they give. And then they stay in that order for a while. So if you can remember where what happened with the monster each time, you're gonna okay, now we're 3 cards in, so he's gonna go after you, and he's gonna turn this way, and he's gonna come after you with a tail swipe. But once you generally, it seems like reduce the monster to half level, that's where they heat it up. Is that what they talk?
Yeah. So different monsters have different sort of the boss gets angrier.
Yeah.
If you think about a video game, at some point the bosses start to flash red or whatever, and all of a sudden they get tougher.
Yep.
So as you do wounds to the boss, at some point they hit that trigger mode.
Right.
And then it can add more cards to the deck.
There's 3 heat up cards for the monster, and 1 is randomly chosen and put back into the boss monster's deck, which is then shuffled again.
Gives
so
them a new
now
move.
it's a new order.
The sequences change, and there's a new power in there.
Yeah.
But as Alex mentioned earlier when we talked about this, also some of the monsters heat up by removing cards from the deck.
Right.
And so that changes what's going to be there too. So it's really that I love the boss fight pattern.
It seemed great.
And the weak spots on the bosses really made that room hyper tactical.
Yeah.
To the point where, and you're trying to, and you start to learn that the boss has got to, he's going to move twice into an area of effect attack and get everybody, so we need to spread out.
Yeah.
Or this time he's going to get everybody spread out, so we got to group up.
Yeah.
And if you can remember the pattern, that's great. But then when it changes on you, all of a sudden, oh God,
right?
What do you do now?
And there's the press your luck again, because I died. There's probably 3 different decisions I made that I wouldn't that caused me to die. I pushed myself 1 extra space to get, which cost me 1 fatigue, which we talked about, to get into the weak spot, so that my attacks would get 1 extra die. Then I opted to take an extra attack, which I didn't need to take, which cost me another fatigue. Then I used my reroll, which I didn't need to use, to try to do some damage with that weak secondary attack that I used. so that when I finally got attacked and I failed the dodge with my 2 dodge rolls,
you had no luck.
I did not have the luck to re-roll it. And so again, that's more tension. That's more pressing your luck with that weak spot. Where do you want to push it? Do you want to get your, take that fatigue to try to step around the monster to get to his weak side?
It got you a lot of ways. You didn't have the luck, and you used more fatigue than you needed to, so you didn't have the wounds you could take to live either.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
So it was like 3 or 4 different press your luck elements
Right.
that all lined up to defeat me and defeat us all.
Indeed, we lost, but we had a great time doing it, and we would definitely play again. So,
absolutely.
So while we can't review it, I think I'd rate it on. This is definitely on my buy list when it comes out.
Yeah.
I'm very excited.
I think this is going to be a lot of fun.
Yep.
I think your brother's going to love it.
Yeah.
I think we'll be.
I bet Reese would like it too.
Yeah.
Is it too old for him? It's so far.
No, I mean, I think he's getting up there. Yeah.
Does he like Dungeon Crawls? Have you played any?
Well, not really. Actually, it's probably about time.
Time, Craig. It's time.
It's time. It's a
time to fight some boss monsters. He's played his video games now. He knows how those patterns work. He's ready.
That's right.
Great. Well, we want to thank real quickly before we say goodbye this episode. We want to thank all the folks here at SteamCon and all the Steamforged folks. They've been so welcoming, Craig.
This has been an experience unlike anything we had ever anticipated.
Yeah.
That we would ever be asked to come to an event like this, especially in England, where the travel was such a huge component of it. The way that we've been treated, the way that every time we turn around, everybody wants to make sure we're having a good time, make sure we got what we need. They've been so accommodating as far as their schedules go. I mean, it's really crazy. When you think about the 2 main guys of the company have been with us 2 or 3 times for giant chunks of time over the course of this weekend at their premiere con, the very first time they've ever done it. It's really that Matt and Rich have just really made themselves available is great. Alex and DC coming, and what we should say is they've all been coming to our room.
Yes.
And so we did tweet out several pictures to show what's going on because we're looking out over the cricket field.
We are.
And it's just fantastic. The venue's been great. The people have been great. It's Headingley, where we are now, is just a beautiful little English town.
It's really nice, actually.
We've been walking everywhere. It really has been an awesome experience, and we never would have been able to pull it off without all these guys at Steamforged helping us out.
Yeah, and I just want to add, I think the community's been fantastic too. All the gamers here have been so welcoming. So many listeners here. I was really surprised. And overwhelmed by that. So many folks have come up to us and said hello. So thank you for all of you who took the time out to say hi to us. Got to play games with a couple listeners, which is great. And just been a really wonderful time. And so couldn't be more accommodating, more welcoming. So thank you to everyone here at SteamCon, and especially Matt and Rich and everybody else here at Steamforged.
Yeah,
good stuff.
It's just been fantastic. So thank you. And the next time we talk, we'll be back in the States. This edition of Jever Notice is brought to you by all of our fine friends at Patreon. Those are the men and women who have stepped up and helped us put together this show and kept it going for almost 4 years now. They're the ones who have given us the ability to maintain all these different relationships with all these different companies that have let us do all the cool stuff we do and bring it all back to you. Ooh, that's a rhyme. Russ could make like some kind of logo out of that. And today, I would like to thank Gary Boyce, Gary Preedy, Gert Shepins, Gino DeVaggio, and Glenn Oberhauser, or Oberhauser. It's just Oberhauser. Do you ever notice how little you really get to know the locale of a convention when you go to a gaming convention? I hadn't really thought about it that much until coming back from SteamCon and realizing that we were in the middle of England. And for most of the weekend, it kind of felt like pretty much any other convention that I'd ever been to. Conventions, some of them are well organized and some of them are disorganized and some of them are really cool and the people there are nice and some of them can be a little competitive and heated and a little bit grainy, if you will. SteamCon was very well organized, ran like a ticking clock, and the people were just fantastic. Every time we sat down to play a game, there were these guys who, many of them were like global champions, who were willing to come on over and help us out, or if we had a question, they'd be willing to answer it, or some often would just sit and watch our game and kind of help as we went along. It was just a great experience. But for the most part, it was a gaming convention. I went to my first real gaming convention was Games Day 1999, where I won my Golden Demon. We went there never having been to any Games Day or anything like that before. And it was in the middle of beautiful downtown waterfront Baltimore. And we really didn't see much of it. I mean, I think we went to a couple restaurants. We went and had some crab cakes at one point. I may or may not have ended up swimming in the fountain on the waterfront on a bet. There may have been a waterfall involved. I don't know. My memory is a little hazy. But for the most part, you didn't really experience it. And then when I think about things like Gen Con, like you go out to eat, but you don't really, it's all pretty much normal. It's pretty mundane. And on the inside, it's all the same. Well, SteamCon, because it was in Headingley, which is a little suburb of Leeds, which is a little industrial city in northern England, was different when you went out. It was very, very funny because you'd be in a convention and Russ and I'd be like, okay, breakfast. Oh, and I'll tell you this, those Steamforged guys, they get up early. And I know I knew that from Gen Con when Matt and I played our Guildball game, and he was like, ripping up and raring to go on Saturday morning. I believe it was Saturday morning that we played. It might have been Sunday morning, but it was really, really early in the morning. For me, I like to get up, 8, 9 in the morning and then putter around for a little while. Russ is an early riser also, so he doesn't notice. But these guys, like the times that were best for interviews and things, were always like early in the morning, so like 8:30. And that meant we had to get up, we had to get ready, and the interviews were all taking place in our room, so we had to neaten up the room. We had to go get breakfast, and that's the main thing. So the taxi brought us from Leeds Bradford Airport to the Headingley Experience Sports Complex. And it's beautiful countryside. It was right out of the movies. If you haven't gone to England, watch any movie that takes place in England, and it was exactly like that. Headingley itself felt a little bit like Charles Dickens to me. There were a lot of townhouses, brick townhouses, a lot of churches, a lot of pubs. Very, very, very classic kind of feel to it. But we took the cab through, and then we were at a convention, and then we were in the convention for a little while, and then we walked, and we wanted fish and chips, so we went looking, and Russ, of course, had an app that would find us fish and chips, and of course the app doesn't tell you what the hours of the restaurants are, so we thought, oh well, it's lunchtime, it was about 12:30, so we went to the most famous, is it Richard Brett's? It's Brett. They call it Brett's. I don't remember the first name, but I think it was Richard Brett's. I don't know. I took a picture of it. Anyway, so we went there. We walked all the way. It was about a 3/4 of a mile walk. We got there and they were closed, of course. So that wasn't great. We ended up going in what we thought was a cool pub with a cool name. The Head of Steam. We thought that was like really, that would be really themey for us. It turned out to be mainly an American, like an American themed barbecue joint. So that was a little saddening. And then we were back at the convention. So Saturday morning we needed to go get breakfast. So of course the app showed us where there was breakfast. Now we didn't realize, looking at the map, that the breakfast was actually going to be about a mile walk, which would bring us into Hyde Park, which was another suburb of Leeds. And of course, we got there. We got there early. Now in America, most breakfast places they're open like 6 or 7 in the morning because you're catering to the breakfast crowd. And this was a Saturday, so maybe a little later. But so we got there right around 7, and they were closed, completely dark. Nothing was open. Nothing was open at all except a 24-hour little convenience store. So we ended up getting our breakfast from a little 24-hour convenience store, and then we were back in the convention. We finally got our fish and chips. That was Saturday, right? Saturday afternoon. But the thing is, we were at a convention, and we really you just forget where you are, and then we would walk out, and the walk to Hyde Park is kind of what I wanted to talk about because it was beautiful. It was insane. The churches that we saw, the churchyards, the graveyards, the buildings. It was all foggy, of course. In fact, it was so foggy that I'm sure most of you have checked out the Twitter feeds and everything, and you've seen the pictures of the view from our room of the massive. I keep wanting to say Quidditch because I said it as a joke when we all went out Sunday night after the convention was over, and I can't remember. Yeah, you'll know, and don't feel free not to email me too, because I'll remember later. It's fine. But anyway, big massive. We couldn't see any of that either because of the fog. Was the point. So then I got to thinking, like, this must be why you do Geek Nation tours, because you go out and you do all those cool stuff, those cool things that you don't get to do when you're in a normal convention. And I thought, what else have I done? Games Day, we did the crab cakes once. I mean, at Gen Con, actually, because the town is so embracing, you can walk for over a mile and still find restaurants that are catering to Gen Con. I mean, Scotty's is great. That's a long walk. The Rams right around the corner, but that's a long walk. But go a little further and see what other cool stuff is there. And then that reminded me of like a couple other places that we'd gone over the course of conventions. But most conventions, you're like, that's where you are, man. And you might go out for food and then you come back, which is, of course, what makes sense. That makes the most sense. But it never really struck me before because I had never been to a convention someplace like Headingley, Leeds, England before, and it just really kind of struck me, and it was neat. It was really neat just walking out, and it was a real vacation, and I think that must be what it's like for a lot of like you guys, you listeners who come to Gen Con maybe, or that we meet at other places. The farther you go, the more it's like a vacation, and it was a cool little aspect that I'd never thought of before. So that was about it. Just really that last little thought and that last little angle on going to a convention so far away. So that's all I've got to say about that. So thanks for listening, and good night, I think is the tone of voice for that one, right? Good night. Whatever.
Achievement unlocked! You've made it to the end of another D6 Generation episode, the podcast whose humor has universally been acclaimed as not too horrible. Please let us know what you thought of the show by either emailing us at info@the d6generation.com or by posting in our official D6G episode thread at the top of the DACA discussions forum on DACA.com. If for some inexplicable reason you actually enjoyed this show, you can help others find out about it by leaving positive reviews on iTunes. See you in 2 weeks. Thanks for listening, and happy gaming.
The theme from Total Fangirl comes from the soundtrack of The Last Night on Earth, the zombie game, courtesy of Flying Frog Productions, and is a composition of Mary Beth Magalanes.
So yesterday was pretty funny. You guys missed it, but over here we have a really nice high-end soundboard for recording.
Mm-hmm.
I plugged it in. Didn't have a step down for the voltage. A little smoke. So now we're recording on this really fancy little micro.